support also. Now, we believe, particularly at AstraZeneca, on science can, we can. So if the science can do, we all can do. And that's our bold aspiration. Science teaches us a lot of things. And if science can, we can. And therefore, our bold aspiration is we want to be pioneers in science, leading in all our therapy areas, and transform the patient outcomes. And we truly believe that we will deliver. I have not put across the number of medicines. We have an ambition that by 2030, we will deliver at least 15 new medicines, which will be driving the industry-leading growth. And of course, we want to contribute for the planet as well. So we want to be in making the healthcare systems also carbon negative as much as we can, particularly in the therapy areas where we operate. We are really inspired by our purpose and values. And when I say purpose, our purpose is that we want to really push the boundaries of science to transform the patient outcomes. Particularly in India, we definitely want to bring and accelerate life-changing medicines, which has been generated by our R&D, by pushing the boundaries of science. We want to accelerate the bringing these medicines to India as well. Now here are 3 words which is important. This pushing the boundaries of science, not only for the patients, we are broadening the definition now. We are saying for the people, society, and the planet. So we want a healthy people, we want healthy society, and we want the healthy planet. And that's the topic for the discussion, and therefore we are very, very passionate about our purpose and the values as well. Now this is what our R&D team works day in and night to enhance the understanding of our disease. We want to definitely understand how do we improve and better the clinical successes, and definitely bring life-changing innovations. At the same time, also find out how do we improve our in-clinic interactions and incorporate the science, innovation, and technology in the clinic to improve the outcomes for the patients. And we want to do this in a possible where quickest and greatest impact is possible on the patients, on the people. We are also understanding and enhancing, and day and night our R&D colleagues, technology colleagues are working together to ensure that how can the data and the AI work towards reducing the timelines for our drug development, enhancing the predictive outcomes in terms of which patients the drug will be most effectively working. So identify R&D productivity. It has significantly enhanced after this whole cycle which we have started following since our global CEO has joined in the last 10 years. It has been a remarkable journey for us at AstraZeneca. What our scientists globally do day in and day out is exactly what we are seeing here on this slide. And we all know how drug development is very complex, tedious process. It goes through a rigorous preclinical, rigorous clinical development. And we talk about the preclinical development filtered into delivering 1 or 2 new drugs. And at every filter, whether during preclinical, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, there is the possibility that drug may not really get delivered into the market. And this tedious and complex process takes almost duration of 8 to 10 years. Of course, we firmly believe that through AI and technology, this outcome can be reduced further. But it's very important to say that it requires billions of dollars of investment and also huge time to deliver one innovative product. Transform into the guidelines. I'll speak in the subsequent slides. So this is a very simplistic way of communicating. I'm sure most of the stakeholders here, they understand, but I'll just, so new molecule being developed for the heart failure. We will enhance the awareness of heart failure. It will also help doctors to identify the high-risk patients who will receive this drug through an appropriate randomized clinical trial. Evidence which comes from the various randomized clinical trials get sent or submitted to the regulators, they approve the drug, and then also this evidence is considered by the guidelines committee to include this evidence in the guidelines, and this is how you shape the guidelines. Guidelines and regulatory approvals both eventually result into this innovation being used in the healthcare systems. So healthcare systems look at the value which this innovation delivers to the healthcare system, and that's how the transformation of clinical practice happens, and that's how the patient outcomes gets improved. Just to give you an example here, let's take maybe lung cancer. The average survival of lung cancer when it diagnosed in the stage 4 was only 2 years. Average, I'm saying, 2 to 2.5 years, couple of years back. With all the innovation which has come, now there is a potential possibility that this lung cancer patient can survive for 5 to 7 years. And we are talking about many, many innovative drugs from different multinational organizations which have gone through the same development pathway. The evidence is published in the guidelines and it is being used. And lung cancer was treated as one single entity. Today, lung cancer is not one disease. You have EGFR positive lung cancer, you have ALK positive lung cancer, you have ROS positive lung cancer. So there are different predictive markers and therapy is becoming more and more personalized. Similarly, I can talk about the examples in the heart failure. You have significantly reduced the risk of hospitalization in the heart failure, particularly when we use the dapagliflozin, when you use any SGLT2 inhibitor. And that's how the guidelines are changing. So you are reducing the multiple hospitalizations on and speak about these examples. So this is how the guidelines get refined. So based on the evidence which is generated, you have a class 1 and category A guidelines where SGLT2 inhibitors now can be used to prevent the hospitalizations because of the heart failure. Another example of adjuvant treatment with osimertinib, trying to provide a potential curative option in the early lung cancer. So this is the evidence which is generated on the innovative products, and this is how the guidelines get changed. This is what the value they see. There was no curative option available for lung cancer earlier. Now you have a potentially curative option where adjuvant therapy can be given after the surgery. And these are the outcomes which are very, very defining for the person who is going through that disease. Now I spoke about the innovation. I want to really touch base even on the generics as well. Once the patent life is over, there will be a development of generics. And I would encourage the audience to read the book called as Lifesaver of Millions. How does this drug development and innovation and the guidelines eventually, after the patent life, the generics coming, and now it is becoming almost every healthcare system is adapting those products. And I'm talking about isoniazid and rifampicin, particularly for tuberculosis, has saved so many millions of lives. And that's why the book called as Lifesaver of the Million. I strongly encourage you all to read that. How these innovations are changing the outcomes for billions of patients. For generic approval, I'm sure you all know, but just to simply explain, the generic product has to do a bioequivalence study comparing the area under the curve when you do a time and concentration curve, compare the area under the curve of the generic product versus the innovator reference molecule. And when the area under the curve are equivalent, then it is considered as bioequivalent, and that's how the generic products gets approved. Usually the interval which is given for this area under the curve matching is 80 to 125. So it is allowed. So the margin of 80 to 125 is allowed, which also as a clinician, sometimes I feel, particularly in the highly sensitive drugs, this 80% may be sometimes very challenging. 125% may be challenging, but it's okay. The the regulatory guidelines are there. We need to respect that. So 80 to 125 is the usual interval, particularly when we talk about based on which the generics gets approved. Now, if we look at the generics, will have the same active ingredient. The active pharmaceutical ingredient would be one and the same. For example, when we say dapagliflozin, all the generic products will have also the dapagliflozin. Maybe the salt is different. Maybe the excipients are different, but the active moiety will be more or less the same. It will have a same dosage strength, it will have a same dosage formulation, same route of administration, and almost, because we are saying bioequivalent, so the concentration which will be delivered will be 80 to 125% when you give the generic product compared to the reference product. Where they can be different? Now, these generic products, for example, I'm sure the audience knows, right? When you talk about a paracetamol, you will have so many paracetamol formulations in the market. So, where the difference could be, they may look different. The size of the tablet may be different, the contents will be different. One of the very key difference between the generic and the original research molecule or innovator will be the different excipients. The formulation process will be different, because that is the trade secret of each company to manufacture the product. The cost may be lower of the generic, and the physicians and all the stakeholders sitting in the room should reflect on that, is cost the only reason why we should choose a particular generic or the innovator product? That's the reflection each one of us should have. Why I'm saying this? Because pharmaceutical equivalence is not equal to bioequivalence, and when there is a bioequivalence, it does not mean there is a therapeutic equivalence. And there are many examples which have proven this. I'll just cite some of those examples here. Particularly when we say active ingredient will be different, but there are literatures where we say that pharmaceutical excipients define the actual formulation quality and therefore the efficacy and safety of the product. Safety also is very, very important. The conference is International Patient Safety Conference, and excipients will also have, and there are many literature cases where they have reported that some excipients results into allergic disorders. We are all aware about the famous cough syrup examples in the market, right? Recently, that was what, because of the excipient. The generics cough syrups, and some of the cough syrups used some of the excipients which are not acceptable from the global standards, and therefore they resulted into a lot of deaths of the children, and that was one very famous example which we have recently seen in the media, in the Indian media as well. I'll talk also about the atorvastatin example, and atorvastatin generics with multiple formulations, if you see, and there is a literature. There is a methylation impurity, and these literatures are in the peer-reviewed journals. These impurities have a specific effect on the mechanism of action, which is HMG-CoA reductase, which is the mechanism of action of statin. And if we look at, because of these impurities, and there are literatures also, from the real world evidence, the innovator statins and the generics, there is a difference in terms of the cardiovascular event. So if you use the innovator, so there is a average, on an average, the cardiovascular event 31% higher, particularly when you are using the generic statin compared to the innovator statin. Again, it's a literature. In high-risk patients who already had a previous cardiovascular event, this difference is almost 62%. So in high-risk patients, all the more the risk increases, particularly when you use the generic statin, and this is published. And again, I'm not referring to a specific generic. I'm in general talking about the generic versus the innovator products. This is an Indian experience coming from a virtual clinic which is run, where they compared that the patients who were given the virtual clinic support and it was presented in the Diabetes India Congress, where they saw that even the glycemic control as well as adverse events were more reported. The glycemic control was better with the original dapagliflozin compared to the generic dapagliflozins, and also the adverse events were more with the generic dapagliflozin. Again, a real world experience. This was one of the study conducted by academic institute, and it also suggested the same, that itraconazole, when it was used in the serious condition, the outcomes were different when you use the generic versus the innovator. What it depicts, and of course there are media news, we have seen a lot of media news, I don't want to really go in details, but what it conveys that there are issues, and it's very, very important for us to be vigilant about these issues. So just to summarize my talk, how it affects the overall patient safety. The innovator drug development is different. A lot of evidence is generated on the innovator products. Guidelines get refined based on the evidence from the innovator product. The generic products, we have to be vigilant, and cost should not be the only consideration. We need to ensure that vigilance has to be very, very diligent. We should be aware about what is the efficacy and safety of the generic products vis-a-vis the original product in the real life, and based on which the healthcare ecosystems should take the decisions. All the more important in India, particularly when we know that there are issues which are reported in the clinical trials. So with that, I really want to thank the organization for providing once again this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Interesting talk. We will take the questions, so please do not leave and do not feel that we do not have questions for this session. Moving on to our next speaker. Very happy to announce Ms. Lisa McKenzie. She is a Vice President for the Asia Pacific Region Institute for Healthcare Improvement. Ms. McKenzie has honors in B Physio, MHA, GA. She's also on the GAICD board, has more than 20 years experience across health, aged care, disability, and community sectors that she's worked in. This includes leading large-scale strategies to transform the delivery of healthcare and sustain impactful improvements across multiple organizations, communities, and countries. Currently, Ms. McKenzie is a vice president at the Institute, where she also has a team across the Asia Pacific to support the regional partners and improve the design of health systems and achieve better outcomes for the populations they serve. She is a board director at the Community Health Organization, a retirement community, and aged care home services provider, and is also an independent advisor for a disability services. She also has a Master's of Health Administration, a clinical background in physiotherapy, and is a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. Please put your hands together for her. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Namaste. It's a real privilege and a pleasure to be here with you today. So just as they're getting my presentation loaded, I'm very keen just to understand who we have in the room. How many of you are frontline clinicians? What? 1, 2, 3. Frontline clinicians, caring for patients. More, good. What about health service leaders? Few hands. In the world of accreditation? No, a funding body for health services. In government? And in providing services like drugs, therapeutics, devices, innovation space. Excellent. It's just good for me to get a better sense of who we have in the room, because the presentation that I'm going to give is around whole system safety. And I want to ideally kind of bounce off you a little bit, especially to give you some chances for questions about what it really takes to achieve safety across a whole system, which I know is what we've been focused on the last couple of days, the dialogue that we've had, the insights that we've been sharing at different presentations. So the organisation I work for is the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. Some of you may know us. We're a non-for-profit organisation. Our main offices are based in Boston, but we work around the globe. I think at last count, we were working across 42 different countries, and I have the privilege of leading the team across the Asia Pacific. So I feel very, very privileged to be here with you in person rather than beaming in on a screen, which is what we've been doing for so long with COVID. So in terms of safety, it's clear that around the globe, health systems are under unprecedented pressures as they attempt to try and care for their patients and their services, while also navigating the ongoing impacts of COVID, budget cuts, workforce shortages, very, very high demands on services. It's very, very difficult to know what to prioritise. So many leaders talk about being inundated by data and KPIs and, juggling all the requirements of funders and accrediting bodies. All of these competing demands are having an impact on safety. You can see these headlines: hospital blunders, patient deaths, complaints about unsafe care, and harm that we know is preventable. But despite all of these pressures, our commitment to providing the highest standards of care that heals and does not harm, has not changed. And if you think back to thousands and thousands of years, Dana yesterday in her keynote introduction talked about the Hippocratic Oath. And we do have a few clinicians in the room. Maybe some of you are medical graduates, excellent, and probably still remember when you graduated and said a similar oath, pledging this commitment to first do no harm. This vision is shared by the World Health Organization in their Global Patient Safety Action Plan, where they call for a world in which no one is harmed in healthcare. Inherently, we all want this. It doesn't matter in what part of the health system that we work, we all want the best standards of care for our patients and our communities. However, the pressures we face and the design of our health systems gets in the way of us providing great care every day to those we serve. So, how is it that we can achieve this vision for safety? If so many times we find ourselves reacting to incidents and complaints and issues about things going wrong, and that constant reactive cycle, although it might lead to lots of actions and projects all trying to attempt to improve safety, we often call this 1,000 flowers blooming. Many organisations find it very, very hard to achieve results, sustain results, and spread results across their organisation. And so at an organisation like mine, the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, what we're trying to do is partner with organisations and really help them to shift from this very, I'll say, piecemeal and reactive approach to safety to a much more proactive approach, where organisations still may have 100,000 flowers blooming. However, they stay in bloom everywhere, every time, so all patients consistently get great care. Doesn't matter whereabouts in the organisation, you're consistently getting great care. So how do we do this? We've found that there are 4 key things that really need to be in place for organisations to be able to achieve whole system safety. The first element that we found is incredibly important is that leaders need to set a clear vision and a strategy that shows that safety is a priority. And this provides a true north that allows the staff to get behind and really contribute to achieving this safety vision. And then you need to be able to know what matters most to those you serve, so you know what to prioritise when trying to provide safe care, and you know how to respond when the situation changes or when there's issues that evolve or risks that come up. And that means you need to have access to data, qualitative and quantitative data. That data can come from so many different sources. It can be feedback from patients, from families, from community members, or it can be feedback from staff, insights from funders, from regulators, from innovators like many of you are here today. And using all of that data to proactively provide safe care every time and be able to address those risks and anticipate things that may go wrong in the future is critical to safe care. Then you need to have an enabling environment and a culture that supports safety. That's a culture where you've got your staff and your patients feeling comfortable and able to speak up if they've got any safety concerns, where there's trust and transparency and effective teamwork, where all leaders at every level are modelling the desired behaviours that shows that safety is a priority. And then finally, you need to have a way of delivering safe care and a way of actually deploying your strategy that supports continuous learning. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. This triangle is called the Duran Trilogy, and many of you are probably familiar with this. It was many years ago was invented by a real pioneer in quality improvement, Dr. Joseph Duran, who actually he worked across the entire 20th century. He lived until he was 103, and he was still consulting in his 90s, something we could all aspire to do. But he came up with this trilogy, which essentially is a way of thinking about things that need to be in place to be able to achieve whole system safety and quality across your system. So you need to have a way to effectively plan, manage, and improve quality and safety with learning systems in place so that you can continuously know what is the most important things to be doing at any point in time and responding to the evolving needs of those you serve. So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into what this actually means. And because this is kind of a funny shaped room, and I would usually use a pointer, but you're going to have to just bear with me, I'll orientate you to this graph. So here on the left, on the y-axis, imagine this is a safety process. So the higher the number, the safer the care. And on the x-axis at the bottom is time. So the first part, quality planning. In quality planning, leaders need to understand what matters most to the patients and communities they serve, and then they need to set strategically aligned performance goals to meet those needs. They then need to invest the necessary resources and establish the systems and the governance processes to set the organisation up for success. And this includes doing things like establishing standard work. We talked a little bit about guidelines, but guidelines and protocols, the things that are going to be clear to staff about how do we work around here, and then making sure that they allocate sufficient staff and build their capabilities so they can deliver the goals that they've set in quality planning. The next part, quality control. In quality control, what needs to happen here is your staff need to be able to monitor performance over time, and they need to be able to watch about how is our current system performing, what outcomes are we getting, and how does that compare to our desired performance goals. And what they're doing is every single day they need to have mechanisms in place where they're touching base, things like huddles or rounds where they're talking to each other. They're reviewing that performance data. They're reviewing feedback from patients, and they're reviewing things like recent incident results or audits or accreditation results, so they're getting that real-time data that they can understand what is happening and is there any unwarranted variation where they're not meeting performance goals. Because this is going to inform actions and things that they can do to proactively address any issues that might be arising and to be able to put safe systems in place. And this could include doing things like your standard work that we talked about, taking the benefit of using the protocols and guidelines that were set in quality planning, or it could be problem solving and taking proactive approaches to do things like, goodness me, this this shift, we are short-staffed. We need to do something about it. We've got a very, very high amount of patients with very complex needs. We're going to need to do something about that, and constantly evolving and taking action so they can deliver safe care that meets the needs of those they serve. But sometimes frontline staff cannot actually resolve the issues or risks they face, or the needs of patients or consumers change and they want even safer care. And so when this happens, this is where you need quality improvement. And quality improvement is a structured approach whereby you use improvement methods and tools to redesign the system to create new levels of performance. You can see new levels of performance being achieved here. It could be, rolling out a big medication safety program across your organisation. And what you're doing there is you get a team together, they're testing ideas, they're implementing new changes so they can use tools like this Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle, but they're using improvement tools to fundamentally redesign the system and achieve those new levels of performance. But it doesn't stop there. Once you achieve those new levels of performance, you need to sustain those new levels of performance. And to sustain those new levels of performance, you need those continuous improvement loops to come back to quality planning, because you need to reflect on the lessons that have been learned. And you need to put the same systems in place. It might be update your policies or your procedures or guidelines to re-establish what standard work is going to be. Or it might be that you need a new training system or something for your staff so they can have the capabilities so they can sustain that performance over time. And this continuous loop, this continuous cycle keeps happening so that you know that you are always going to be delivering that very, very high standards of performance that meets the needs of your patients and communities. So it can be a little bit confusing to think about how these three parts are interconnected and interrelated, but I'm hoping that this visualization, it can help a little bit in terms of understanding how these three components fit together. And I know we haven't got a lot of time, but I put this slide in here not to spend time to go into the details, but to be clear that this is not a magic solution. It requires constancy of purpose, and it requires engagement from all levels of the organisation. And I've put a link to a white paper that the Institute for Healthcare Improvement has developed on whole system quality. But if you would like to dive a little bit deeper to really understand the different roles that staff can play at all levels of the organisation, from the most senior levels of governance to the frontline clinicians providing care at the bedside, this paper will give you some of those insights. So I recommend that you read it. So to close, because you don't want to go too long past the binging bell in case they pull you off the stage. So to close, I would like just to have you reflect on what can be done in your organisations around strengthening safety and creating that proactive approach. Is there a clear, compelling vision and strategy that shows that safety is a priority? Do staff at all levels have access to data and insights so they know what matters most and they know what to prioritise so they can deliver safe care? Do you have an environment and a culture that supports safety? And is there effective delivery and learning systems in place so that your staff have what they need to be able to constantly deliver safe care and be able to respond to evolving issues and risks so they are proactively providing the best standard of care to their patients? It is this delivery system that will enable you to successfully deploy your strategy. So, very rapid fire, lots of content, but just to let you know that we've got a heap of tools and resources and publications that you can download from our website. So please, I encourage you to do so. I'm going to be here for the rest of the day and would welcome connecting with any of you if you're interested in learning more, because together, we can create safe systems that create health and wellness and do not harm. Thank you.
Lisa, for reminding us to do no harm and deliver what matters. Very important to keep reminding us of each other of that. So our final speaker for this session, privileged to announce, Mr. Amit Sharma. Sir is a director from Pfizer, Strategic Accounts and Neighboring Markets. He has intense and a professional experience of 24 years in the profit and loss management, leading large teams of sales leaders in business to business and business to consumer, business with prime experience in sales strategy, operations, product management at the national level. He also has a lot of experience in the digital transformation for the process, application, storage, connectivity, platform, cloud, IoT. I think you're like a whole IT, kitty.
So I'm the student in here.
Yeah, business management, transformation, and so much more. The consistency in delivering the business results and business transformations. So over to you. Keen to listen. Keenly looking forward to listening to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anjali. And thanks, Apollo, for first of all organizing this conference very close to my heart. As you've seen, this profile was more for saying as to why you should hear from me, right? Here as an outsider, not from the healthcare industry. But yeah, so that's my passion, how to impact human lives, and that's what the vision of Pfizer is, also breakthrough that change patients' life. Now, a few things which, okay. So please, this is a disclaimer. Don't listen to this person too much. We are not subscribing to all the thoughts which he has to share. But yeah, the whole idea is, which I've been following through in life, is three things. One, as a childhood, I heard so many great achievements and so many great stories. And what I could observe was only small gaps and small information. And that showed me the path towards insights and possibilities. Then what is complex for people is too complicated for me, for I am so simple. And hence, worked upon breaking the things into so small pieces that they don't seem so complicated, and hence I can make an attempt and celebrate the mini milestone and successes. And while doing this, I figured out again, all things cannot be done by you. You requires partner internally and externally. And if this is done by being brilliant at basics and by making execution as a differential point, we can really achieve what we want to. So my presentation today, or a talk today, is more about from outsider's view of saying we are going to discuss what we all know. Definitely most of you and all of you know much, much, much more than me. I'm just reminding it as to what's there. What are we doing about it? But more than what more we can do about it, the possibilities. Now, if I look at the first part, which is about prevention, and what does a prevention mean? It means very different for very many different people. For most of the Indians, and the way our demographics are, it might simply mean a difference between life and death. It could mean, how do I prevent tomorrow a huge fiscal deficit is not there me because of a healthcare. Whereas for topmost strata, it might mean, how do I have a healthy aging? The example which Liza took about 90 years and still consulting, right? How do I become more of that? And that's also the burden of most of the states which are having aging population, of having a healthy aging. And to that effect, if you look at how WHO defines prevention, is all the approaches and activities which are aimed towards decreasing the impact of a disability or a disorder which will affect an individual, either by interrupting or by slowing down the progression of a disorder or reducing the inability. What are the different modes of prevention? All we know is primary, secondary, and tertiary. I'll speak about the secondary and tertiary first. So hence, how do I do proactive blood checkups, mammography, and all those things to know more about my health? And we call that person as being proactive about his health. And tertiary is all which we are best at. When a disease has been found, how do we really address it? do as an individual? Do I eat right? Do I take a vaccination, for instance, to avoid any problem in future itself? Have I stopped doing something which I was not doing right, say smoking? And this is where the biggest gap is. And this is true for every industry. It was true from the industry which I am coming from. Telecom is supposed to be most advanced industry. Today, if we talk of AI to any other transformation, that's been built on telecom. But if we talk about basics out there in the industry, the same things were missing. We start thinking so high that we stop doing what is required at the base level. Vaccination has always been known across all the countries. In fact, most of the national immunization policies, particularly in Asia Pacific and not so developed economies, have been only concentrated about children, not so much in adults. Whereas there is plethora of so many vaccines right across influenza to pneumococcal to hepatitis and typhoid and many more, which are there for adults. But do we really do something about it? Are we as adults even aware about it? And it may be true for many practitioners as well. Now, just a data, because we find more and more of global data, is say US, the most advanced economy where almost all the approvals are happening, most of the R&D is happening. There also there are cases of 40 to 50,000 mortalities because of infectious disease as influenza, pneumococcal, hepatitis. There is a burden of healthcare because of vaccine preventable diseases to the extent of $10 billion. Now imagine India, 18% of the world population, what it could really mean. Few more parts which I picked up as to what are different infectious diseases. This will not really tell you about what's this burden of disease within India, but it will tell you more about what's the probability and hence how serious the morbidity or disability of this disease could be. So influenza H1N1 between 2015-19, over 1,26,000 cases. Pneumococcal, out of 374 studied cases, almost 60% of them had a pneumonia or a pneumococcal septicemia, and almost 25% of them had meningitis. And similarly, you can go all in all and look at different disease and the burden, like hepatitis, 44,663, 7.5% of the people who were tested for hepatitis A were tested positive. This is huge. May not seem a huge number. Apply it on Indian population and suddenly it is maybe the world's largest number. Now this is a publication by Niti Aayog, in which even the government clearly realizes that a lot can be done in terms of preventive care, and particularly for adults. They understand that there is a lot which we can address in terms of vaccination, in terms of pneumonia, in terms of influenza, hepatitis. They've clearly named it. You can see the reference of many societies, right from Geriatric Society to Indian Physician Association, Medical Association, as well as occupational health. All of them are recommending various vaccinations, definitely for 60 plus. But now, when you look at the data published by API, and what you have to just simply see here, maybe things will not be so clear, it's so small font, is all the things which are almost purple and green which are recommended by API or are globally recommended, and right from the ages of 19 years and onwards. Particularly the callouts are pneumococcal, influenza, hepatitis and meningitis, which are relevant for all age holders right from 19 and above. Now, if I have to ask, how many of you run or do some kind of exercise 3 times a week? By just a raise of hands. Great, at least about 2, you two, everybody knows now you're a runner, so I expected 2 for sure. So all I can say is I just counted 4. How many of you are pneumonia or pneumococcal vaccinated? Not people from Pfizer? Not counted. None. How many of you? Okay. Oh, so sorry, I missed. Uh, how many of you are, say, vaccinated for hepatitis B? Very nice. How many of you are, say, let me go back, vaccinated for HPV? No, influenza has almost become a norm because that's how Western countries set up norms, right? And it's something which has the highest level of awareness. But even if to that effect, it's just around close to around 4 lakh doses of influenza per month in India. And out of that, 80% are in pedia. So again, nothing in adults, literally, right? So now, here is a room full of healthcare industry, and the outcomes which I could see by just simple raise of hands were amazingly low than what I thought I'll expect from at least this industry. And here we are, the health bearers of making a difference to the life of the people. Now, I'm moving towards then hence, where is it, what's stopping us, and what we can do about it. Now, if I have to look at challenges, I would like to classify them into 4 areas. One is a patient, the first one. I am a patient. As I said, I'm no industry expert. Am I aware? Definitely, I got aware once I joined Pfizer. But generally, are most of the patients aware? And most of the patients have a cognitive bias. It will not happen to me. And in India, it might be an affordability challenge as well. But now let's look at the healthcare professional. Let's me say particularly doctor's side. A doctor sitting at a OPD has a long waiting list of the patients who have come with an acute problem. Do I see more patients and address the problem at hand, or do I spend 5 more minutes about preventive health care? So how will they even get aware, or how will they get the prescription? So that's the challenge or a gap with the doctor, the time and the best utilization of the time. Hospital. Do we have protocols? Why is it left to an individual? Or do I have a particular facility where it can be addressed, and it's a health experience center right from nutrition to exercise, and definitely about preventive health and vaccination. And then it's about the ecosystem. Today, most of the insurance companies do not have something which covers on the OPD side. In fact, Pfizer was one of the companies which tied up first with ICICI to say, take a vaccine shot and you'll have to pay a lesser premium. Right? It's such a nice business case for ICICI saying that they will have to reimburse lesser. And such a nice thing for a patient to say, I have to pay less premium, and more than that, now I'm not exposed against certain threats in my life. Right? Now, why I wanted to have this talk here? Because the temple of healthcare is a hospital. The kind of reach which even the top hospitals have in India is close to about 10 to 15% of Indian population. And the amazing benchmarks which you keep on setting in terms of quality, of Indian quality of healthcare, and what possibly can be done across all the 3 areas of ecosystem, vaccine infrastructure, and science as the leadership. I would now definitely like to pitch in some Pfizer also somewhere, saying as to why Pfizer. One, the robust pipeline. We have over 18 vaccines which are in different phases. Like phase 1 has close to about 6 vaccines. 1 is for improvement, and 5 which is enhancement of the existing product, and 5 are new molecules. Stage 2, again 2 for new molecules. Phase 3, again more or less 4 new molecules, and 2 are in registration. Not only that, there are vaccinations available across pneumococcal, meningitis, RSV and COVID, which is already there. So we have a strong pipeline. More than that, there is a dedicated team committed for just making preventive healthcare in India possible. And there is a long-term commitment. And that is where this topic was so close, saying that if we are talking about Indian patient safety and prevention, let's start from what we learned the first. Prevention is better than cure, right? All of us across the globe, everywhere would have learned, but we stopped practicing it. And here is my last slide, which simply says, what can we do? And hence I'm leaving to actionable. Let's have a dialogue with different stakeholders where we can collaborate. Doctors, government policymakers, pharmacy companies. Second, let's spread the awareness. Let people know. They should know that they don't need to spend money. They do not need to have a disability. They can possibly take a preventive step now. As hospitals, let's help shape a protocol. Let's probably create a room which is dedicated in a hospital for a preventive healthcare and for vaccination. And the last, I just have a question mark. Please tell us what more we can do. And with that, before the bell ring, I would like to conclude saying, together we can, together we must, and together we will. First, save ourselves, just like Atlas saved before dropping the earth, or when the announcement says, put on a mask first, and then we will also make sure it's there for the patients. So with that, let's move towards in that direction. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. We've had a wonderful discussions and presentations, starting with Dr. Kukreja, who took us into the world of, pharmaceutical world, going into research and talking about the comparison and the need for innovations, and then the comparison with the generics, and where are we headed towards that. We moved over to one of the most important, scenarios that we are in terms of the world crisis of the healthcare and pandemic from which we are still emerging, where the World Health Organization clearly asks us, to do no harm, and let's keep going back to that, and shaping out the healthcare for the betterment. And then when we talk about betterment, what are the steps that we take? That's where our pharma industry comes in. These guys are our backbone in so many ways. It's like being a clinician and not having the ammunition is almost like, probably just reading a book and not, doing what the book asks you to do, if there are actionables in that and if there are learnings in that. So you're very much a part of us, so there's no way that we could exist without you. But I loved what you said in the concluding line that, what more can we do? So that's for the people here who are here as our audience to give their insights, to give their suggestions. So the house is now open for Q&A, and happy to take any questions that we have for the speakers. Yes, ma'am. Can someone please give her a mic? We have a question. Could you also be specific in which speaker you would want it to be addressed to? And please do introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Yamuna. I come from Apollo Hospital, Chennai. I take care of infection control at Apollo Hospitals.
Great.
So my question to you, ma'am, the graph depicted showing about the quality planning, quality control, and then improvement. Many times we don't see the level of improvement which we expected time of planning or in the control. How to address that? Are we going in the right direction, or we should stop back, think back again whether the planning went wrong? Or is it a part of the graph itself that it does happen sometime whenever you're doing a quality improvement?
I think excellent question, so thank you very much. I think one of the challenges we have is there's a bit of a blurring between quality planning, quality control, and quality improvement. many organisations use the word quality improvement, but they're actually not doing true quality improvement. When I described what quality improvement is around a very structured method, using improvement science to achieve new levels of performance, like really redesign the system, what we often see is people say the word quality improvement, but actually what they're talking about is parts of quality control, like quality assurance, which sits in quality control, things like accreditation, box ticking, and kind of some of the things which they're actually not fundamentally changing their system. So if we really want to achieve the improvements that we are ambitiously wanting to make, there's a need to actually develop the capabilities of staff, which goes back to quality planning, so they have the skills to be able to drive those new levels of performance. And one of the most important things is, what can we do to learn together? Because there is already so much strong evidence out there about things that work. It could be in pharmaceuticals, it could be, but we often don't even have some of those fundamentals right. But then how can we also learn together to really accelerate the pace of improvement, accelerate innovation? How do you take ideas from inception all the way to impact? What does that look like? How can we actually do that together? So I think there is a piece there about capabilities of staff to actually drive improvement. It's about learning together. And then the sustainability piece, because I think often we get excited, we do a piece of improvement work, everyone's very focused at the start, but there isn't the ongoing focus. And so really being thoughtful about putting the systems in place, not only to be able to kick back and learn, but then how do you embed the new ways of practicing so that you maintain those better performance levels? And so you need the same discipline across all of those different components. And I think, and because we have so many leaders in the room, it really also, it comes down to leadership, about that constancy of purpose and being able to just be relentless in the focus for higher quality care. And so if you can think about all of the components of quality planning, quality control, and quality improvement, but not lose sight of the big picture about, are you actually fundamentally providing better care to your patients? I think that's what it comes down to. So a long answer, but...
Yeah, that answers my question, ma'am. And what is the duration which you always should look upon? For example, a small size project, what is the time duration I should be looking? 1 year? I mean, that's the question where we always stuck, that till what period am I sure that I have made a proper quality improvement over here?
So I think it's important, so there is no magic answer to that, but behaviour change and requiring people to practice differently is time consuming. There is no magic fix. And in terms of the length of time for projects, like sometimes projects can be very fast. You can achieve improvements, like COVID. We saw like monumental changes happen in days and weeks, which previously, I don't know, I feel like, this is the Silicon Valley of India, but in where I'm from in Australia, we didn't really even have telehealth. We had some organisations with some telehealth, and IT systems went from not being able to do any of those things to suddenly in 24 hours turning whole workforces remote. And so there is something about the speed at which we do things. But if we're trying to change behaviours of clinicians, change the behaviours of our patients, that is complex and it requires time. So sometimes some of those very, very complex changes, a year can be, and if you're working at scale, a year, 2 years. But I think it's something that we need to be very realistic. And so trying to actually understand who's done it before, how did they do it, and how long did it take is actually a good place to start.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi, I have a question for you, sir. I'm Dr. Matthew. I'm a physician from Mumbai. And nowadays I see more and more patients coming to me and asking me, can I take generic medicines? And there has been a huge increase in the number of outlets also which are giving these generic medicines. And when I look at the components, they look the same. But the companies which are manufacturing, I can't even understand, and they keep changing every few months. So I just want to, because it's a healthcare quality ultimately, and I feel that we as private practitioners are not equipped enough by the industry to what to tell the patients about the pros and cons of generics. So that's what.
So I think it's a very interesting question, and thanks for raising this. This is exactly the dilemma which even the healthcare ecosystem and all the practitioners have. For example, particularly in India, all the generic companies also, which are like more than, so new product is defined as typically a 4 years in India as per the DNC Act, NDCT 2019. You talk about 4 years. Now the challenge is that after 4 years, any pharmaceutical company can go to the local FDA and get the approval. Based on what? Sometimes they don't have to even do the bioequivalent studies as well, which are like considered as mandatory outside India. So as you rightly said, now we need to educate all the stakeholders sitting here together, need to educate that we ask the relevant questions from our healthcare ecosystems to the payers, that whichever products we are including in the formulary, are we including the products in the formulary only based on cost, or is there a quality parameter also? What kind of evidence they have generated? Do they have the bioequivalent study at all? What are the excipients? Because most of the innovator prescribing information will have the mention of the excipients as well. So I think it's important that each stakeholder in the healthcare system becomes more knowledgeable and informed about it, and ask the relevant questions, that when I'm including the product in the formulary, when I'm prescribing the product to my patients, at least patient should take an informed decision. Most important here is it's not, there are generics which, because India is also pharmacy capital of the world, India is sending the generics to the entire world. So it means the capabilities do exist. But the question which we have to ask is, the generics which are supplied to the US are produced in the US FDA approved plant, whereas generics which are supplied to Indian market are produced from where? And exactly what you said, you keep on changing the companies, you keep on changing the excipients, you keep on competing on lowering the cost, then you use the excipients which are less costly. Did you follow the process of post-approval changes as per the regulatory system, where you establish that if I am changing an excipient, my dissolution product, my bioequivalence is not changing? Or did I do even the bioequivalence if I change my any excipients? There are standard norms in international, if you look at all the formulation development and generic pathways. Are our generic pathways aligned to our global pathways? Not yet. We are on the journey, but not yet. I think it's important for us to be making our patients aware, making our physicians aware, making our payers who take the decision of entering in the product into the formulary more aware. In fact, one of our effort, particularly to bring this topic in this conference, was exactly the same. We want all the stakeholders to be aware about the nuances of generics in India compared to the nuances of generic in the developed world, and more importantly, at least we know that we need to be vigilant. I would not say that generics definitely do save the cost for the patient. They do save the cost for the healthcare system. They play an important role. But are we vigilant about the adverse events, the efficacy? Are we collecting the real world evidence data and proving to the administrators and the payers that, okay, these products seems to be equivalent in the real practice also, but we are not doing that. And that's, I think, a gap which we need to all collectively address. More than happy, because some of the examples I've shared, atorvastatin was one example, dapagliflozin was another example. There are so many such examples. Being vigilant means we also have to put across efforts in looking into the literature. There are case reports where there are products were administered because of excipient change, not because of API change, that has resulted into a serious anaphylactic reactions. Cough syrups were a classical example, we all are aware, sir. So I think we need to bring these examples when these decisions are being taken in the healthcare system, in the hospitals, in the clinics. And that's really, really important and crucial. But thank you for asking that question, really useful.
Thank you, sir. I hope that answers your question. Do we have any more questions? Anybody? I think we can take one more question. All right, please go ahead. Can we have him? The mic, please.
Thank you for answering that, sir. Just one question in continuity of what you have decided. these are the limitations which you have told. There is no BA/BE studies in Indian scenario, and there is not enough data. The alignment to the international market, it's not there in India. So in this limitations, how do I ensure the quality product is entering into my hospital drug formulary? Say I have made my criteria like I will give a place 3 brands. One brand is the innovator brand. The other 2 is, one is quality alternative, and then third one is the cost effective. So when I'm deciding a huge market of generics in India, deciding the brand which will be into my drug formulary, so then everybody comes with a WHO approval, everybody has COAs, everybody has everything, all the certificates. Now, how do I make a decision that this suits my second place, this suits my third place? Is it based on the reputation of the company, or it just what? On
So I think it's absolutely important for the committee to discuss what should be the criteria which you should consider for including. And thanks for saying that you want to definitely include one innovator product, which is very important, because that will give the real world evidence comparison of other 2 products which you are entering into the formulary, whether what are the differences between the innovator product and this. Most important, as I said, was vigilance. Now 2 or 3 practical tips which I can give, because I have a background of pharmacology, so I know how the drug development and generic development happens. The product which we are entering into the formulary, has it been proven bioequivalent to the original reference product? That's the most important. Usually in India, again understanding the Indian regulatory system approvals, because my regulatory teams gives me a lot of feedback, is the first product which comes into the market after the generic innovator, they have to mandatorily do the clinical trial as well as bioequivalence. They have to mandatorily do as per the system. So that's probably could be one area which you could consider. But asking the right relevant questions, that we are not only talking about the manufacturing, like WHO, as you rightly said, there are many companies which will have a WHO manufacturing, I would say, qualifying criteria. That is only once when the inspection happens in 5 years. Now, if they change, any chemist changes the excipient, you can't control that. So I think it's important that whichever 2 products are there, and I am not an expert to recommend any specific products, but I think the criteria should be discussed, having a clinician, having maybe people who have a real knowledge of how the regulatory development of those products happen, and asking for the right relevant questions, that have you done bioequivalence, have you done clinical trial? So at least the other 2 brands you could consider would be probably of that nature. And there are institutions who are asking those questions. So I'll give you an example. For example, if I go to TMH, TMH has an annual contract, and TMH ask for what is the research which has been done on the molecule before entering into the formulary. So they ask innovator also, they ask the biosimilar or even generic player also. And then the committee decides, and the committee has the clinician, committee has the pharmacist, committee has the payer also. So I think it's important that the committee arrives at a qualifying criteria, and then we can follow the quality improvement as Lisa nicely explained. Then once we arrive at a criteria, then are we consistently following that or not? That will be important.
Thank you, sir. So we have had a wonderful session. Just to sort of, answer a bit of your question, sir, I think Pfizer is a big honcho already in the pharma industry. You guys are doing incredible work. There's so much that's already going into research and collaborations. But I still feel that, because Apollo Group, for example, has already taken the visionary, of our chairman, of focusing on what is already been said, the prevention is better than cure. So we are going towards the preventive health checks. So that's the area where you need to sort of, push the maximum, I would say, leverage towards. That's where you need to. Also, I feel when we talk about research, we do a lot of high-end research. But I think this scenario where the pharma industry probably needs to figure out where do they enter into the medical education perspective. So why I'm saying this, because when I was a medical student, I did not know Ranbaxy, I did not know Cipla, I did not know Pfizer. But I did know that these are big brand names by my final year, or by the second year when I was doing the OP, sitting next to my professor and, focusing on what medications was being prescribed. Why I'm saying this? Because the major cities, you guys will do great. And you will know. The aim is to basically give out or create awareness to as many people as possible, because if we are wanting the typhoid vaccines to be taken or HPV to be taken, then the takers will have to come from, my so and so and so and so. So those takers will only come, or those consumers, or those, effectivity will only come through when we reach out with the basic information to them, which is happening. But because we need each other for that large scale of, information to be taken through. So that's where I feel the medical students, the paramedics, the nursing students, everyone has to know this. So it has to be a part of our curriculum as well. So I guess the policy holders or the policy makers need to, inculcate that into a part of a medical education. That's where I feel is the root, where, or the stem part where we need to start making the difference. So, so please.
Biggest partnership with Apollo. In fact, we have two center of excellences for vaccination with Apollo at Hyderabad and Kolkata, and we are seeing great outcomes. First of all, in terms of that, since then the vaccination has almost doubled, and the people who are being profiled have almost quadrupled. And yes, we did think about catch them early, and today uh, not only it's about colleges, but we have a program and an application in which every doctor or person who is going to become a doctor can really register, and it really starts from the basics. It comes as a very nice quiz platform, and we are seeing now thousands of registration and very excited platform coming up as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, huge round of gratitude to all the three speakers. It's been a privilege. I don't think I would take this as a direct opportunity, but I do take this as an alternate opportunity to be able to come and fill in the heavy shoes of Dr. Sanjeev Singh. On behalf of him, on behalf of the Patient Safety Conference Committee, Core Committee, and the whole of Apollo Hospitals, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart to really come by and, give us your expert comments, your expert learnings, and to share it with our audience. And we would love to have you again. So looking forward to your next talks whenever we have another conference or another platform. So thank you, the audience, for listening, and for all those who had time to, ask good and relevant questions, because this is the way forward. Thank you so much.
the intervention is a cost-effective intervention. That means it will end up saving costs for your hospital and for your patient. But if it's less than that, great, you're already there in the benchmark, there's no need for you to worry about. But if your baseline CLABSI data is more than 0.18, please do consider the usage of these dressings for prevention or reducing the impact of CLABSIs. The solution that 3M has that we bring about to you is the Tegrim CAG dressings. This is a very well evidenced product. There are a lot of studies that have gone into it, 22 randomized meta-analysis and all put together. We have about, we have studied in different types of catheters, and I'll talk about 2 studies that probably are the basis on which majority of these guidelines that we have just shown have taken the guidance. This is the Team Seed study, which was published in the year 2012. But the important fact of this, or the outcome of this, is significant because of 2 reasons. One, they have done this over a period of long time. It has been over 4 years study. Secondly, they have chosen a hospital where they already have a very, very minimal incidence of CRBS. To start with, they have about 1.3. Right? We know the average CRBS rates in India. It's hovering somewhere about 4.5 to 7.5. But this hospital already has a very low infection rate of 1.3. So the intervention was to compare what happens if you use a impregnated dressing, chlorhexidine impregnated dressings, versus a non-impregnated dressing. And you will find that there has been a significant reduction of infections. About 60% of the infections, both from CRIs as well as the colonization incidents, as well as the actual CLABSI, have been a reduction of 60% in this particular study. The second study that I want to quote is 2019 study, which was real-world data. Most of the times we're talking these days about the real-world data. And this is again in 2019. This is also a very long period of study. The earlier was 4 years. This was 11-year study. And they have again divided this into 4 phases. The first phase was when they did not have any chlorhexidine impregnated dressings. Second, they introduced 50% of the dressings with sponge dressing. Then they moved into a 50% sponge, 50% gel, and the third one was a full gel dressings. And I have not taken all the steps here, but if you look at the first step, where they have only standard dressing, they have an infection rate of 1.12, again, very, very less. But if they have moved to the dressing which is sponge dressing, a significant reduction to 0.42. But again, the take-home message I would like all of you to do is, if you look at the CAG gel part, the last step in the whole study, the infection rates have come down to 0.1, from a 1.1 to 0.1. So again, reiterate the fact that if you are having an infection rates of baseline of more than 0.18, there is a significant cost reduction and benefit to the hospital and to the patient for involving the utilization of such dressings into your prevention strategies. And even a hospital which has got the lowest infection rates have been able to substantially reduce it by 60%. The second technology I would like to share with you is the one that counters the intraluminal piece of it. And one way to do, one of the significant, I would say both a boon and a bane, is the scrubbing of the hub, right? And all the people sitting here who do it on a daily basis do know how easy it is, and at the same time how difficult it is, right? But before I go into that piece, again, following the logic of the first rationale, what do the guidelines talk about? The rationale is that similar to the Tegrim CAG dressings, the Shea guideline talks about use of antiseptic containing hub or connector protector or caps for any type of connector, right? And if you look into a little step further, 2021 INS standards, they don't deny that manual scrubbing of the hub is not good or bad. No, they do consider both passive and active disinfection of the hubs as golden standards. But what they do add a caveat is that the compliance and consistency are the critical elements in preventing the intraluminal routes of infection for these patients. Now, what does the 2 elements mean? Compliance and consistency. Now, that's where it becomes a little messy when I say for the hub protectors, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Again, look at the oncology guidelines. You have all from across the different countries, looking at Canada or from Italy or from Germany. They all are talking about protoprotectors and moving towards utilization of passive protection than active protection. And why is that? So the rationale behind that is the inconsistency piece. Now, the inconsistency is in two forms. The inconsistency is in the mechanism itself, the way that you scrub the hub, how much you have to scrub, how long you have to scrub, what amount of friction you have to scrub, whether it's linear motion or circular motion, all that comes into play. That's one inconsistency in the practice. The second inconsistency is in the way that it has been done, or the standards itself, because the standards do not talk about inconsistency of the time that is utilized when you're using a povidone versus an alcohol or a chlorhexidine one. A simple factor, or the matter of fact, if you're using povidone, you will have to wait for a longer duration of time, for drying time. If you're using chlorhexidine, again, there is a very less amount of information of utilization of chlorhexidine on inanimate objects. Most of the data that we have of chlorhexidine is on human skin. The additive effect or cumulative effect, all this is on the human skin. Not very much data is available from the inanimate objects. Because of all this, there is a lot of inconsistency in practice, and therefore, from the nursing perspective, it's actually very hard to have a standardized practice. And therefore, the move towards the passive disinfection is now the norm, and therefore, there are different, the ones, that solution that 3M has is called Curos, and we have a different solution for different types of connectors. And the two that I would probably want you to focus would be the needleless connectors and the male lures. That is the most common. And then the green caps, you can remember the color. That's very bright and easy to spot. So you will be able to know whether there has been disinfected appropriately or not. The rationale behind why the movement is happening, well, there's still a lot of study and information that is required, but this has been a meta-analysis of 1537 articles that has been done in this particular product portfolio, but 9 studies were included for the systematic review, and on an average, the reduction of the infections was about 40% or more than 40%. So for every one CRBSI that happened in a or a manual scrub the hub intervention, only 0.5 CRBSI happened in the intervention that utilized the passive disinfection. So that's the rationale behind the usage of both the solutions. One is for the extraluminal and the intraluminal. One is the chlorhexidine impregnated dressings for prevention of extraluminal infections, and the use of passive disinfectants, the Curos caps, for prevention of the intraluminal infections. And that both of them put together, you will have a reduced risk of infections. You will have an increased compliance from your staff. There is reduced cost because of the healthcare advantage that you have from an economic standpoint, and also can save time for the nurses to focus on the patient rather than on the line. Okay? With that, I think we all agree, and this is the patient safety conference. So preventing any infection is protecting the patient. So that's I think it runs very well with the theme of the conference. So every movement counts, and therefore we will request if you're interested, please reach out to us. We do have a stall here, and we can share with you the information more on these two solutions from our side. So thank you so much for your attention. If you have any questions, maybe we can talk about later. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vikram. I also like the fact that you stuck to time, you gave us all the data, you made a convincing argument, and all of it in time. I think that sets the tone for what is going to follow. How many of you all in the room here are medical practitioners, as in doctors? How many of you all in the room here have been patients in the last 1 month? Visited a doctor as a patient? None of you all? Wow. Okay, I'll tell you what I don't like. My most uninteresting part of going to a hospital as a doctor is the fact that they don't look at you as a person. A number of times I've gone there and felt invisible, completely just another person. And there are times when I try to make small talk and tell the doctor about my interests, but the doctor is so busy, I get it. Doesn't have the time for this small talk. So I'm particularly interested in our next talk. It is by Mr. Rajiv Vasudevan. He's the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Ayurveda Hospitals. And the topic that he is going to discuss with us today is on standardized, personalized, whole person medicine, feasibility and its implications for patient safety. Cannot wait.
from where my previous speaker, Dr. Vikram, and where he ended, and then take it from there. He was talking about the post-lunch situation, and in Ayurveda, incidentally, exactly half an hour after you have lunch is the time that you feel sleepiest. So welcome to the sleepiest part of the afternoon, and then I'll see whether I can wake you up. The other part he concluded by telling prevention is the best protection. So let's see whether these things resonate in the presentation I'm about to make. And this topic was selected before I came to know about a big debate that happened yesterday, right? So it was there was a very fiery debate yesterday on this topic. In the allotted time of 8 to 10 minutes, I'll quickly speed through the slides, and then the whole thing seems to be a contradiction in terms, because we're talking about standardized and personalized care, right? How can these go together, right? And is there a concept of how these two come together for whole person medicine? And if that is there, then what are the implications, right? So this diagram, right, we talk about systems thinking, which was very much in vogue a couple of decades back. All the best companies globally, 3M, I'm sure, also looked at systems thinking, IBM, Infosys, because you said that I should be looking at a many-to-many cause-effect relationship, not a single cause, single effect relationship. It is so complex that if you look at the fact from a sperm and ovum, we are all individuals, unique individuals standing here, and we try to reduce it to the most reductionist approaches, whereas things are complex. I have an intrinsic health potential. So when we get so enamored with genes and genetics, we have to understand it's only my health potential. It is not a definitive cast in stone prediction of where I'm going to go. I have health behaviors. These health behaviors are essentially diet, lifestyle over a 24-hour period, not just whether I go to the gym or so on. And these behaviors happen at a certain place, right? So why this becomes important, me in relation to environment, this starts coming from there. What I do in Chennai today and what I do the same behavior in Bangalore or in Jaipur has totally different implications for me. But I just take it as all, I walked, I ate, and I don't place it in time or place. And seasons of life, very important. Time of day, right? So 6 parts of day, 6 into 4 hours. What you do, the same behavior at different times of the day has different implications on health. Time of digestion. So that's what I said. Half an hour after I eat my meal, I'll start feeling sleepy. That's a kind of post-digestion thing. So those who tend to sleep post a heavy meal are more likely to have poor metabolism leading to diabetes. Okay, so these are predictions, and you'll actually see in reality how those people who stop sleeping post-lunch, they sleep pre-lunch, will find the sugar levels getting under control without any other change, right? Circadian rhythm. And then of course, the time of day, time of digestion, time of season, same behavior in different seasons, and finally time of life. What I do in my 30s, if I do in my 60s or my 70s, the behavior is fair and square, but the same behavior has totally different implications for me. So I have this situation where we have the potential, I have my behaviors in a place, time, and each individual has got a unique medical past and a current health status, specifically in terms of what is my metabolic status, metabolism status, what is my inflammation status. So the same behavior triggers different things, but we try to reduce it. So it's not so simplistic is what I want to tell. The fact that when we talk, everybody talks about it, this epigenome, right? A recent paper, last 1 year back, talked about the fact that these factors mostly which are completely controllable, my diet, my lifestyle, my environment, the environmental pollution, all of these, if you reverse those things, you're going to reverse the epigenetic changes. So far, as much to tell that you can reverse aging in the person, right? So if you take aging as loss of epigenetic information or system entropy, right? The disorder in the system, ancient systems like Ayurveda had posited that thing called Vata Vikriti. That means, so we won't get too much into Ayurveda, but just to understand, we should not get caught in the finite and lose track of the system as a whole, right? So the sum of the parts is not quite the whole, or the whole is more than the sum of the parts. And these are reversible. This is from a very prestigious journal, Harvard, professor. So, and therefore, this concept of a dynamic balance. Every human being, for example, I was sitting under the AC. You are far away from that. I sneezed, you didn't sneeze, because I am subject to certain physical stresses, mental, emotional stresses, how this works upon the body, right? So when I look at whole person health, I need to understand these are working. And the very subtle point that good health has the ability to restore homeostasis. Not a particular state, but the ability to, so if I'm healthy, my ability to restore this balance is much better than somebody who is not able to restore the balance. So good health is not just in terms of biomarkers are important, or some measurements that we take, but we have to understand they all are ineffective unless I'm able to be adaptable to a changing environment, physical, mental, spiritual. It goes so far. This is a very recent paper. Effective therapy must be directed towards re-establishing homeostasis, right? We forget. We're so caught on a symptom that we forget the fact it's a unique whole person that we are tackling. And how do we tackle? This is something that we'll approach. This is the SF12 wellness indicator, the 8 things on the right-hand side. You will see the parallels in what Sage Sushruta in 600 BC talked about. What we call the virtuous cycle of good health. You might talk in terms of, you talk about a person who's a convalescent after a road traffic accident or a stroke. The first thing you have to understand, and actually many of the situations which you are showing in some of the partner hospitals, the key thing, you keep the person alive, prevent infections from coming in, but how do you get the person to heal? And this process of healing is restoring the virtuous cycle of good health. That means I eat better, I'm able to sleep better, I'm able to eat better, I excrete better, right? My mind is calmer, and all of these are interconnected. I can't do one and say, give me a sleeping pill, give me a constipation, anti-constipation medicine. No. So if I look at this, and the fact that a subtle point here, SF12 talks in terms of limitations not being there, right? This talks in terms of positive traits being present. So a state of good health is the presence of positive traits as opposed to the absence of negatives, right? Is one key thing. And this is very interesting. 20,000 people who consulted at our hospitals. We just took this data. This is also published in the Apollo State of Health report. Just one slide here. We covered 6 parameters which are there on the right-hand side. And you can see the percentage of people who had those issues: sleep, disturbed state of mind, anxiety, and possibly depression. And then the fact that metabolic health, we'll look at, there are much more details here. Bowel movement, excretion, right? The key factor here, 2/3 of the people had 3 or more of those issues out of 20,000 people, okay? 82% had 2 or more issues. Can you just imagine? And we are telling, mostly they think we are healthy. But this is what the burden of well-being that we carry today as a modern human being, right? And we ignore this. We are so focused on disease parameters that we forget the fact that a well-functioning human being will be completely comfortable with this. There's a very good book called The End of Illness. David Agus, an oncologist from California, he wrote this. It's a 2012 bestseller, New York Times #1 bestseller. He talks about a scenario where you're born and you die without illness, right? We have taken it for granted. In fact, Jisha said, last month have you been to a doctor, right? The fact is you could never have to go to a doctor if you are able to understand. And David Agus says, can you wake up every morning and see whether, and most of the parameters are these parameters. He doesn't know it's Ayurveda parameters, but these are basically anything that every individual can be empowered to know, right? So therefore, we come to the point about whole person health, right? It's not to take one particular body type and try to, that's not the intention, but just to show that typically a person has multi-morbidities. And in fact, latest journal articles, if you study, you'll find that there's very little evidence or research happening formally on the prevalence. There is some data in India, but on the impact, what is the evidence, how to approach, because you're so focused on single morbidities, but very rarely, and some data from the US, which is slightly few years dated, 76% of the US Medicare bill goes for people with 5 or more chronic diseases, right? But we are cutting each one separately, but people have multiple things. In our case, 50% of our cases have multi-morbidity. So all of this comes together. In addition, compromised quality of life. This comes together. many of them are subject to polypharmacy. Again, which drug, what drug, different doctors, maybe even Ayurveda, all things come together into my papi pet ne poor pet. That poor pet has to metabolize all these medicines. This study is illustrative, the need for one-person trials. Why I bring this up? Because of the personalization bit. Nature magazine, top 10 drugs sold in the US, for every one person it helps, 3 to 24 people do not get any impact. Why I'm bringing this up? Each person is unique, right? The gap between bench to bedside is quite revealing here. And this is top 10 selling drugs, right? After billion-dollar trials which are going on. So, and this is a Nature magazine article. Therefore, we go to a concept which is, we look at root causes, which is essentially inappropriate, no good, bad, inappropriate diet, lifestyle, state of mind being disturbed, comorbidities, and external factors, right? So external factors is one among five. We call this the Pancha Nidanas. And through this, the disease symptoms are expressing, the root cause are down below, right? Do I have a paradigm in which I can analyze this and go? So quickly to show one example here, a diabetic patient, these are the Nidanas, the 5 contributory factors, outside food. This is what is happening in his life at 40 years. And I will show you the outcomes. Through this particular sequence is coming here, which is basically a etiopathogenesis flow. From the inappropriate behaviors, I have certain imbalances in the body, and you have a theory. Now, whether the theory is right, wrong, in what theory, like string theory, there's a theory, there's a framework of knowledge where you establish this etiopathogenesis. How the root cause leading to the pathogenesis, which is the evolution of disease, leading to the symptoms coming out, which are the bottom things, right? So you establish this connect between root cause behaviors and the symptoms I experience at a personalized level. And that leads to this very interesting thing, 3 diabetic patients, all in the plus 10 or around 10%, but each with a unique etiology and a unique tree. And look at the outcomes that are being achieved. In fact, in one course of care itself, significantly there is improvement. So what we want to tell, and this is standardizable. So when we talk about process-driven standardized care, does not mean you're, like yesterday the discussion, Dr. Rohini, the fact that you're not doing the same one-size-fits-all, but you follow a process. The principles applied are the same, and then you are able to personalize. So this is just to illustrate that one severe diabetes, 3 patients, each getting a personalized regimen to do it. And the reduction is quite across a larger number, approximately 50% reduction in fasting blood sugar. And this in just 2 to 3 weeks' time of treatment, you get incredible outcomes and care. Other part is multimorbidity, right? 13 presenting issues, 1 disease tree coming here, right? And you'll see the outcomes which are quite, this patient comes as the treatment of last resort. All these symptoms will be there, and there are also international outcome scales which establish here the changes which are happening with respect to that, okay? So functional health parameters and also patient-reported outcomes. So you're getting a multi-dimensional view of whole person care. He has come for diabetic treatment, but all these areas also getting corrected. So you can have a 360-degree outcomes tracking, which is covering all these sub-parameters, including control charts during treatment. The checklist manifesto is going back about 8 years. Dr. Atul Gawande in the US talked about it. I'm sure it's there in many operation theaters. The Ayurveda Samyak Lakshana charts goes back to 600 BC, 800 BC. Very clearly telling, in process, when do you decide the person is ready to go to the next stage? All I want to tell, our ancestors were quite wise. They adopted the same thing. It's just that it's being perceived, it's not seen outside, right? All of this happens in leading Ayurveda hospitals. And this is the, as I conclude my presentation, a very interesting thing where we collaborate, right? So take a typical hemiplegia patient in one of our partner hospitals where we run an inpatient Ayurveda center. Patient comes with a stroke, neurosurgery does the surgeries, and there are some supplementary procedures by vascular surgery, and pulmonology needs to do some rehabilitation. Third phase, about close to 30 days or 20 days after the patient has come to the hospital, Ayurveda steps into with a very specific functional health objective, right? And phase 4, the patient is handed over to Ayurveda in a seamless way. The key part to understand, the patient is at the center. There is a disease evolution or disease stage, and you decide who is supposed to take the lead role, right? In fact, very often multimorbidities, what they say in the journal articles is that most people don't know who is the lead physician, what is the lead problem. Nobody knows who is taking the lead for the patient. The concept of a primary treating physician, these are fundamentals of patient care, which we tend to forget in the mass running. So how the co-managed care process gives you very good outcomes. These are all scales and other things which are used. This is the UK Functional Independence Scales, FIM. So you can apply all the same scales in any whole person approach, right? It's about a desire to do. In our case, for example, we have 80 indicators, structure, process, outcomes, right, across different clinical managerial indicators. Quickly, you can see the improvement in health. This is just over the last few months. We cover all our treatment patients, right, those who come for Panchakarma therapy, 940 patients, you can see 66%, the top one is 100% satisfied with improvement, other is 80% satisfied. So very good satisfaction levels. Informed care, right, in treatment and consultations, uniformly 100%. Do's and don'ts, what is the diagnosis, what is the diet and lifestyle. So clearly keeping the patient at the center and with a personalized approach. Probability of recommending to friends and relatives, one of the key measures of satisfaction, extremely high, you can see here. And adverse health events. Now, it's very important to understand, typically if a patient is too vulnerable to be admitted in an Ayurveda hospital, we will take the person out and we'll not be, we'll be referring even before the person is admitted. So we take planned admissions, not so critical patients. Nonetheless, the tracking of adverse events is important because Ayurveda is not safe. You can give a good medicine to a wrong person and you can have problems. So you have to be careful. So just to tell that very low adverse events over the years, right? We haven't had a single case. Just to say that you can track, you can monitor, and we have an independent body who calls up and checks with the patient on this. It's not the hospital team. Centrally, we call all our patients. And you can look at the CSAT over 4,250 patients. This is quite revealing that 98.6% give us a top 2 scores. So to conclude here, concurrent standardization, personalization is possible. It has to be disease stage specific, life cycle specific, not just one size fits all. Multimorbidity, polypharmacy to be considered. We have to do this juxtaposition of the patient and the disease, not to just take disease in isolation and person. Person, disease, every person is unique. That's where the personalization opportunity comes. We have to look at the host microenvironment because you're not only looking at the medicines and the pathogen or some other disease, but you look at the fact, how am I within myself? Multidimensional clinical outcomes, integrative co-managed care. The path to true patient-centric care starts with an open mind, ours. If we as healthcare providers, patients start realizing that there's no one size fits all, and if we can do that, we would make progress. Thank you for your patient listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. How many of you all have questions? I have so many questions for you. Anybody with questions for our first two speakers? Hold on to those questions, write them down, because at the end of our next two speakers, we will have a session for all of you all to ask your questions. So keep them ready. Next, we have Dr. Zanjana Butch. Zanjana Butch. Her name means aspirational, and I thought such a beautiful name. So Dr. Zanjana Butch will talk to us about integrative medicine and patient safety perspective. She's the Chief Medical Officer with Ayurveda Hospitals.
Good afternoon and namaste. My name is Dr. Zanjana Butch and I serve at Apollo Ayurveda Hospitals. With Mr. Rajiv already set the tone and a very clear foundation of whole person's care and how health system evolves and how are multi-factors that are responsible for health and disease. For such a kind of an understanding that has been there in Ayurveda system of medicine, it is now important for us that we are in an era that we have moved on, with multiple complexities, new medical conditions, our lifestyle changing, we cannot have a similar system of medicine that is taking care. We need to come out of the box and look for a system that takes care of all the various multiple factors and complexities that we are seeing. And we saw that right away in right 3 to 4 years ago when we were down with COVID. There was no clue that what this disease looks like. Irrespective of that, all systems of medicine were making their efforts to understand, to decode the pathogenesis. And then came a time where there were patients who took both the systems of medicine, found that they had a greater recovery. And most of it is also endorsed, acknowledged, and published in most reputed medical journals. With this, my topic for today is integrative medicine. Integrative medicine, as we all know, has evolved over a period of time, not quite clear, but today I am trying my efforts to make points that will lead a background, not just for India, but across the globe. We'll talk about the global burden and the overwhelmed healthcare system. We would be talking about disease and health scenarios in India and scope of integrative medicine. Health from 1.0 has reached to health 4.0, and this correlates with industry 1.0 to 1.4 to 4.0, but it is also beyond that. We need to consider the choice of well-being and mindfulness over conventional options, and this is very interesting and a mind-boggling report that has come in 2024 from McKinsey, and this can be repurposed for Indian population, and this age group is very small. We need to understand with all this philosophy of integrative medicine. Global status of integrative medicine over the last decade, only about last 20 years, the global system is talking about integrative medicine, and especially this in terms of oncology, pain management, somewhere about rehabilitation. It is not spoken across the specialties. I would also speak about safety in integrative medicine approach, India's push for integrative medicine, and sharing some of the insights of real life cases that we are dealing every day practicing the principles of integrative medicine. We can see here the current burden that we are facing, not only in India, but across. We can see various medical conditions like every report that a patient goes through, dyslipidemia, cancer, neurodegenerative condition. There are foundational pathogenesis pathways which talks about inflammation, catabolic physiology, insulin resistance, and oxidative stress. While these are just the pathways that are told, these are fundamental pathways for any given medical condition that was already existing or is going to evolve. We need to keep that in mind. We are seeing that people are living longer, but are they living really in good health? While the global expectancy has gone up, people are living with lot of comorbidities, with lot of medications and poor quality of life. What do we do for that? People are just put on medications. We can see here a current trend that is in the world is all about Ozempic. Everybody is talking about losing weight. People have stopped eating, like in this thread, as you can see, they have completely changed their diet and have gone to a different kind of a body build in order to tackle obesity and diabetes. We are seeing that the whole focus of all the organizations is on an emerging burden that is antimicrobial resistance in human health. While there are measures, stewardship, which is being carried out, are we understanding that this is caused by what? Are we contributing towards this? And also, I looked upon while preparing for this presentation, apart from COVID, already there have been listed 10 medical conditions that are just there and the bomb is ticking. And why? We believe that this could be because of an inappropriate practice of medicine or the current scenario that is there. There could be lot of factors that are going in which is leading to this. Keeping this in mind and parking that there, I want to share with you this scenario that we face as a Ayurveda practitioner every day in our life. Last evening, I received a patient of a squamous cell carcinoma where she had been to a leading hospital in India. Completing her radiotherapy and chemotherapy, she was declared to be cancer-free for that particular period of time. And she was told to monitor every year and then gradually over 3 years and then 5 years. While she had completed the treatments and she was declared tumor-free for that particular period, she was suffering from residual symptoms. With that, she reaches out to a cancer herbalist somewhere well known in India. And the most popular botanist who also prescribes Simharuba, which is published with some amount of evidence. With all this is done, patient also tried Tibetan medicine which was there. It has been 4 years now that last evening when she came to us with completely foul smelling ulcer that was there. Hard palate was completely involved. And in last 4 years, she has not had a single follow-up. Reason was not that her primary oncologist did not follow it up with her. She was extremely scared. She was not happy with the environment and the kind of treatment that she was receiving because it was extremely common, it was not personalized. It was a standardized care that she was scared to go through repeated PET CT scans and MRIs. It was very disturbing for her, and not that she is also from a very poor background. Her daughter is a researcher and a well-known person, well-informed and educated person. I am stressing this because this is not only, there could be many reasons that the patient would have not been guided. But I think the fundamental problem or the lacuna is because there is no system well-defined where the patient or the bystander is hand-holded and told that you could be in a place where your current etiopathogenesis of cancer as well as your residual side effects can be very well balanced. It is at that point of time, Ayurveda, with our kind of an understanding, we have established this concept of integrative medicine, integrative oncology. But by the time patient reaches us, it is too late. We need to do something about this. Case scenario 2, we see a lot of patients, especially in this scenario, I would like to say a patient who has been diabetic and has also progressed to metabolic syndrome for quite many years and who is already on multi-medications, like he's on OHA, he's on insulin, and antihypertensive has been added, statins recently added, and also on antiplatelets. During this course of time, it is likely that he may remain stable, but it is also likely that he may have a macrovascular complication and who would have undergone a surgical intervention. This is very common. By the time this happens, this goes on for 10 to 12 years. After about a period of some time, patient is tired of polypharmacy. He or she approaches a standalone alternative approach, giving up the entire prescription that was there, compromising the health core objectives that are being there. He puts himself or herself in a situation which is life-threatening, where in case if he requires an antiplatelet, he is not doing that. But we do not know whether he really requires or not, because the system that is involved has not seen him from the core of the pathways of disease progression that he is doing. In the scenario that he approaches an alternative medicine healer, he may face that there is an unscientific approach taken, there could be an irrational deep prescribing. There could be inadequate monitoring of outcomes, and progress to sequel of diabetes and metabolic syndrome could be very fast. Versus that, imagine a scenario where he is with a physician who is trained in integrative approach, where the physicians of both the systems, of both the worlds, carry out an unbiased review of systems from both the sides, does a rational deprescribing. There is robust monitoring of outcomes from both the systems of medicine, Western world, as well as an a complementary system like Ayurveda. Prevention of sequel by identifying early warning signs. We also see this scenario where we see a lot of patients undergoing stroke, undergoing cancer, etc., are left prepared before the surgery and after that. The concept of prehabilitation and rehabilitation is existing in very small parts. This I spoke about, which is very important. The two findings that I want to share, that young generation is now choosing clinical over clean. They are not just looking for natural items, they want items which are clinically proven. They also want that these have to be recommended by a doctor. Even in such scenarios where the healthy population, apart from the diseased people we spoke about, healthy population is looking after their health. In this way, it is important that Ayurveda system and modern medicine gets together to form that whole concept of preventive health. And as we spoke about health evolution, we saw about healthcare 1.0, where one doctor was in charge of the patient. And we have moved on from there to 2.0, where lot of equipments, devices, wearables started coming in. Electronic health records as 3.0, and 4.0 as we see with new complex conditions. And at this time, it is important that we need to go back. While healthcare 1.0 was very strong in clinical acumen because there were less devices, there was only robust thinking, intelligence which was put to carry out diagnosis and derive a rationale. While we are moving on, we are going towards healthcare evolution, but are we really contributing to the outcomes that are required for this complex system? And I found a very interesting book where the author is a psychiatrist, and he says that formerly when religion was strong and science was weak, men mistook magic for medicine. But now, where science is strong and religion is weak, we are mistaking medicine for magic. It is time to pause here and see how we can change this. So, integrative medicine, I'll just quickly go ahead. That vision for a smart, safe, and connected care. The answer is integrative medicine, where it covers the patient with full range of physical, emotional, mental, social, spiritual, and complete well-being. We can see that clearly there are no definitions of integrative medicine. Predominant areas are only oncology, neurology, mental health, pain management, core specialties addressing gut, metabolism, inflammation, immunity, and communicable diseases with respect to integrative medicine are missing. Clarity on scope of integration. We can see a lot of articles which talk about conventional medicine plus yoga, conventional medicine plus acupuncture. Where do we stop? And should we have a clear demarcation of which system gets into what? That is very much possible if the experts of each system are able to open-mindedly sit together and derive the clear scope of integration. For all this kind of a thing, it is important to carry out a shared decision-making process. From both the sides of systems, physicians need to sit together and carry out an unbiased review of systems where host and disease are placed side by side. And by doing so, we will be able to derive a system which is lot more safe and which is lot more controllable with all the processes are in place. We have covered this, sir mentioned about Apollo State of Health report. I did quote this because from an integrative medicine perspective, it is very important that this system of medicine looks into contributing, improving quality of life parameters because they are the root cause of emerging disease conditions and they can enable the transition from a paradigm of disease to paradigm of well-being. The concept of co-managed care, integrative medicine, Ayurveda plus allopathy, these are some of the examples of real life cases that we have been doing at our quaternary care hospital, right from the stage of diagnosis to the step-down care between specialties that are being covered. I want to share this example of COVID care center that we ran in 2021 during the Delta wave, where multidisciplinary experts from both the sides, allopathy as well as Ayurveda, took care of about 77 patients. And you can see the team that was constituted, which included internal medicine physician, Ayurveda physician, physiotherapy nurses from both the system, and physiotherapist. We derived an integrative COVID management protocol. We derived a concept of food that was non-inflammatory, lab biomarkers, and we could see that patients followed up for a longer time and we could prevent the sequel of long COVID. These are some of the real life cases and examples of integrative medicine that we are dealing at our hospitals, standalone as well as in our quaternary care hospitals, collaborating with the specialist. With this, I would like to sum up sharing that there is a need to derive India's framework of seamlessly integrative medicine. We need to derive a council of all aligned multidisciplinary experts, right from clinicians, academicians, researchers, institutions who are already open-minded and are implementing this framework need to get along together to derive a clear protocol that can go into national health policy, and it can also become a thesis for the global system. Ayurveda is inherently integrative and it can contribute to its full potential. Successful implementation requires not just changes in treatment or so, but behavioral and cultural change in mind shifts of clinicians, patients, and organizations. Thank you, and sorry for taking time.
Thank you. That gives us such a optimistic yet challenging scenario ahead wherein we get all these roadmaps ready and pave the way for the future. Cannot wait for this discussion to lead to more fruitful collaborations. Thank you. Now let's go on to our final speaker for the day. We started with infections, hospital-borne infections, and we round out about there. So we have Dr. Yamuna Devi Ramanathan, who is a consultant infection control, Apollo Hospitals, Chennai, and she will speak more about collaborative efforts that we can do on the global front in infection control. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Jisha. Thanks IPSC for this opportunity to stand in front of you all to talk more about collaboration. We started with infection prevention protocol. We saw more about Ayurveda, and now I'm going to talk about the global collaboration. Are we yet, or we are just traveling towards it? So, Dr. Vikram mentioned about lullaby. Now I'll begin with my topic with a nursery rhyme. We all know about it. Ringa ringa roses, pocket full of poises, atisho, atisho, we all fall down. So this nursery rhyme, which all of us would have narrated in a very bright way, but it was all discussed way back in an old nursery rhyme published in Kate Greenway's book, Mother Goose 1881, which states that this rhyme, nothing but it depicts the plague disease the entire signs and symptoms of this nursery rhyme actually depicts about the plague. The Ringa Ringa Roses tells a red blistery rash of plague, and a pocket full of poisons tells that in olden days these diseases used to come from contaminated air. So if we have fragrance of herbs and flowers, probably we will be able to come away or get out of these diseases. Atisho is nothing but the heralding pneumonia, which often tells the symptoms before even we start with pneumonia, and all fall down means we all come down to death because of this deadly infection plague. So the lessons we learned from history, nothing different what we had even during COVID. It started with the Black Death or the Black Pandemic plague, which started way back in BC 350, maybe in AD 600. But again, in the 14th century, this Black Death due to plague also inherited all over Europe. It killed more people, about 200 million or 1/4 population of Europe, this particular pandemic. The second disease was the 1918 pandemic, where it killed people more than the World War I did because of ignorance of people. The first time when a person visited Kansas, one of the local physician high alerted the public health, saying that I am seeing a new virus, looks like flu, but it's deadly. But people kept silent on that. They were not much vigilant about it. And after 3 months, people from the entire army started getting admitted in Kansas, and from there it moved all across the globe. It was also famously called as Spanish flu. The reason why, because it was not found in Spain. It came from US. But it called as Spain because Spain was never a part of World War, and they published the entire data to the entire media so that people came to know such a deadly virus is killing young population. And that's what the effect turned out to be. And it was no different when we started facing COVID. It also, till 2023, killed around 6.9 million death. And COVID was not different in killing people of younger age group in the second wave. So these are the lessons which we worked all together. And we also started seeing that these diseases are never restricted to one part of the country, to the state, but it travels globally. That's how the plague traveled from Europe to other parts of the world. And that's how in 1918, the Spanish flu started in US. It went across the globe to all the countries. And COVID was nothing different. We all faced it for the next 2 years. And that helps us and call ourselves as a global village. We all are together. If one problem happening in one part of the country, we are not different. We can't stay calm and tell that it's happening somewhere in the world. It is going to affect us over a period of time, if not today, maybe tomorrow. And that's how, and that's why we need to react now. So how can we do this global collaboration? Global networking through the world platforms available, the global organizations which is present like WHO, SHIE, APSIC, ECMID, and Asia Pacific infection control people all around the world. When we look into the antimicrobial resistance pattern, the vaccination which is evolving, all these global platforms have been a pioneer in by which we can integrate with them and spread across these messages in the world. The next is about conferences and workshops. This is one such conference where we do collaborate with people coming from different world, coming from different sectors of industry, where they come and discuss with us what is happening. It's a great learning platform, either an online or offline. Research collaboration. In COVID, at Apollo, we did multiple drug trials as a research collaboration. We also did collaborative research work with the public partners, where we understood the prevention of infection factors and how this antimicrobial resistance causes, or it is more cost-effective issues for the people who get admitted because of that. So that way, the research collaboration helps to understand these aspects globally. Public-private partnership. So we can, or we should, as a norm, partner with the public. See, the main drugs, where the ATT drugs goes, most of these drugs which is needed for the multi-drug resistance are coming only from the public platform. It is not always available to all the private holders. Again, vaccination forum. It's still with private partners, but public are the main who are willing forward and give vaccination. That is the reason why the childhood vaccinations are very good, whereas the adult vaccination is still not ticking up. So that is where the public-private partnership would help us. The next is multilateral collaboration or collateral, the multi-sectoral cooperation with each other, like the summit. These things not only discussed in the medical forum, but it should also be discussed in the political forum. Whenever it's a G7 or G20 summit, as a whole, these level of global pandemic diseases and the other sectors has to be discussed. And recently, now we discussed about Ayurveda, the different sectors of people. All of us have to come together integratively to treat such diseases which are killing young population. Capacity building and training together. We have to handhold each other. It's not that we have to restrict whatever we have learned to ourselves. We have to collaborate with people, train them, took over them, and build a capacity for other people so that they can also get trained with us. Technology innovation, sharing, and data transparency. That's what I mentioned at the beginning. How COVID was different from other pandemics. The reason because the media also played a very major role in bringing things forward during COVID. We started acquiring new knowledge every day. Yes, of course, few wrong messages were also being forwarded through WhatsApp or in the websites, but of course, good knowledge was being shared in the media. All of us were able to understand the newer technology, the new drugs, the vaccines which are coming forward. COVID was the first time when people were able to make new vaccines within a period of 1 year. It had never happened before in the last pandemic, or any other diseases have done it in an innovation ideas. And many drugs, after completing their trials, it was available for an emergency applicable aspect or applicable prospectiveness, so that we can utilize those medicines and vaccines at the larger rate and at the earliest rate. So that's how technology innovation and data transparency helped us out to achieve newer knowledge on these newer diseases. So how do we collaborate? By research platform, as I already mentioned, looking into the newer drug trials. Ambassadorship program, where it's a platform to depict what work we do globally, so that people across the country knows about that as a team, what we do at our place. Technology sharing would always help us to grow in large number, and also helps us in the data sharing. Public-private relationship, we have to collaborate with our Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, with our ICMR projects, so that we can bring partnership with private and public. So our way forward for the emerging infectious diseases to healthcare-associated infection is knowledge sharing, bringing together all the expertise, sharing and pooling of resources. That is very, very important. The reason why, because the world is moving towards equity of care. We all want the same level of care to be fruitful to every population who is in this country or who is in this world globally. So that equity would come only when we share our resources with each and every one of them, and sharing the knowledge and expertise. So enhance the surveillance capacities, whatever is needed in the infection control platform, and always make it transparent for people to know and understand, so that they are willingly come forward to work with you and also understand what kind of problems you are facing with. Because when we discuss globally, people do ask that we have a lot of MRSA problem, we have a lot of Clostridium difficile problem. It's a kind of disease, a diarrheal disease, which people get because of antimicrobial resistance. Even though in our country antimicrobial resistance is very high, the rate of Clostridium difficile infection is very less for us. What is the difference? Is it a genetic problem? Is it because we don't test the people? Is it a diagnostic aspect? We do not know. It's an area of research. So only when we start sharing our data, only when we start discussing these kind of surveillance activities with people, that's the time when we really start collaborating. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yamuna. As much as I hate breaking promises, I will have to break the promise that I made to you all earlier. We will not be able to take any questions, because whether it's the best of times or the worst of times, this is the only time we got. And the next speakers and their panelists are here. So I think let's give it up for all the wonderful speakers that we had today. Dr. Vikram, Mr. Rajiv, Dr. Zankana, and Dr. Yamuna Devi. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. We appreciate this conversation. Thank you.
my previous speaker, Dr. Vikram, and where he ended, and then take it from there. He was talking about the post-lunch situation, and in Ayurveda, incidentally,
Hello, check. Good evening to all. I welcome to you all to the last session of this all, the prescience of patient safety. I'm Dr. Vignesh Ayappan. I'll be introducing the moderator. I take great pleasure in introducing the moderator and my role model and the reason for me being here, Dr. Rohini Sridhar. Dr. Rohini Sridhar has been trained as a pathologist from the prestigious AIMS, New Delhi, and subsequently completed her fellowship in hematology from Melbourne, Australia. She's been associated with Apollo for almost 3 decades. She's currently serving as the Senior Vice President, Medical Services, Apollo Hospital Division, based out of company headquarters in Chennai. She's been instrumental in designing and executing the Apollo Hospital COVID-19 vaccination program across all units, liaising with the government, municipal, pharmaceutical companies, and other relevant authorities to seamlessly execute this program of national significance. She's engaged in various projects related to Apollo Hospital's core offering, quality clinical care. She works closely with all Apollo hospitals to track, assess, and guide them on clinical outcomes, clinical service quality parameters, and evaluation of all clinical offerings, basis needs of the local population, credentialing of the unit, and medical resources. During her 3-decade-long association with Apollo Hospital, she has set up bone marrow transplant services at Apollo Cancer Center Hospital, Chennai. She's also set up Apollo Hospital Madurai, Karur, Karaikudi, and Trichy, served as its CEO and Director of Medical Services. She has spearheaded the clinical protocols and processes at Apollo Hospital Madurai, making it the first hospital in Apollo Hospital Group to complete its NABH accreditation. Her relentless focus on clinical quality took Apollo Hospital Madurai to several national awards, including IMC Bajaj Award and the Rajiv Gandhi National Award. Ma'am, please.
So thank you, Vignesh, for a very generous and rather long introduction. I think though we have the last session, it's a particularly interesting session. And the reason it's interesting is twofold, right? So within Apollo, over the past several decades, we have been working to put quality systems in place. And though we have developed systems, most of our hospitals are either JCI or NABH accredited, we find that there are some blind spots, areas that are not looked at. And in this session that we are dealing with, we are actually addressing the blind spots. One of the things that I was thinking yesterday was when I was listening to the plenary speakers today morning, actually is that diagnostic errors is something we don't spend enough time thinking about. See, diagnostic error, as all of you will understand, diagnosis is where the whole process starts. And given the state of medicine today, there is an increasing reliance on diagnostic tools, right? Compared to about 3 decades ago when you used to make a clinical diagnosis. I can still remember the times when we used to make a diagnosis looking at the patient, listening to him, examining him, and then start medication. I think that day is fortunately well in the past, right? So today you will not get a prescription unless you've had at least a blood test. Perhaps not if you've had a CT or an X-ray or something. So our reliance on diagnostic modalities is increased. And therefore, it's very important that we look very, very carefully at diagnostic errors, because if that piece is not set right, that's the very foundation of the treatment plan that we make. And so this is an area that we need to look at very carefully and very comprehensively. The other challenge with diagnostic errors, and I just want to highlight this, is that much of the stuff is often out of the hospital, right? So we send it out to somebody, teleradiology, we send our samples to some central lab, and then we wait for the results to come back. I'm not quite sure all of what Dr. Anna covers in her talk, but I can assure you that if in your organization you're not looking at diagnostic errors, you're actually doing a grave misservice to your patients, and I would recommend that you spend a lot of time looking at that. So that's the first speaker. The other thing which has now become a part of life for us is medical devices, right? But all of us in this room, maybe with the possible exception of Dr. Pramod Kumar, are really not sure how these medical devices are actually looked at or how they are regulated, right? So you've all heard we'll put a pacemaker or we'll put a valve. Something is put into the patient, but we don't know how long it will work. How confident are we of how these devices actually work? The other challenge is when we get a device which has been looked at, regulated in the West and then brought into India, the cost is often prohibitively high. And so it becomes very difficult for the average Indian patient to reach out to those kind of devices. So there is definitely a need for us to locally manufacture indigenous devices, right? So there is a big push, not just for medical devices, but for everything else, saying make in India. So it's easy to say, right? India can make everything and anything, from a vaccine to a drug to a medical device. But how do you regulate this? How do you figure out that this device is going to deliver as we expect it to deliver? That becomes very important. Again, please look back at your own hospitals, your own organizations where you work, and how much of surveillance do we do to find out if these devices are actually behaving the way they should? You put a pacemaker, the guy goes out, and you might not hear from him, right? Just as I was walking into the room, one of our hospitals called me because they had a patient in whom a pacemaker was put, and that's the reason I keep referring to pacemaker again. He had the pacemaker put, was done, went from this city, traveled to another city. We never heard from him, never came back for follow-up. And then 8 months, 9 months later, the family comes very agitated saying they lost the patient, right? So these are instances that all of us are familiar with, and therefore it's very important to see how do we look at medical devices, how do we know how safe they are, and how do we know that they will deliver up to our expectations, which is what I think Dr. Pramod will touch upon. But if we haven't looked at it, again, it's a big area for us to look at. And I think the final speaker, Shoma, is my colleague. She heads quality in Calcutta, the eastern region, and she's going to share with us a case study of how we integrate quality with patient safety. Right? One of the things you would have realized at this conference today, and we are almost at the end of the conference, so I know a lot of words have been thrown at us, right? Quality, outcome, patient safety. So we are confused now. Is quality not patient safety? Right? Is patient safety not quality? So it doesn't matter really. So when we are looking at it, and I think the best way to look at it is what the conference started with is let's do no harm, above all do no harm. So the exact terminology doesn't matter, but is your patient getting the best possible care, and are we preventing any harm from reaching him? And that's what it's all about, right? So we are very fortunate to have a very diverse panel. So I request the first speaker, Dr. Anna George, who's the head of quality at Aster DM Healthcare, to come and present her talk on reducing diagnostic errors, the challenges and strategies for improved accuracy.
Thank you, Dr. Rohini, for the wonderful setting the context. That's very important. And also the fact that I love the point that you said we need to go back and check what we do. Thank you. Where we do. It's very important to start from home. Whatever change that we wish to see has to begin from ourselves. And it's very good to hear things. A lot of learned people you must have already heard. I don't think we say anything different from what you experience on a daily basis in your hospitals. And very truly said that if you want to see that change that you wish to see in this world, you need to go back and evaluate our own systems in our own hospitals. Having said that, we begin. Today's talk will be on reducing diagnostic errors. We have been hearing a lot. Even yesterday there was a session on diagnostic errors. I thought, first of all, when we talk about anything, we need to first acknowledge there is a problem, or is there a problem? So there's a lot of statistics out there, a lot of publications out there, which actually talk about the burden of diagnostic errors and medical errors in general, of which diagnostic errors plays a very important part of it. It appears to be that only a minority of deaths in the hospitals are linked to diagnostic errors. But even a single patient death that might have been prevented with a better diagnostic process is a death too many. I love that quote because our whole intent when we say patient safety, when we say quality, is how we can even save that one patient from getting harm or getting an experience that is not as pleasant as it should be. So what's the problem? So again here we talk about evidence-based facts. Diagnostic error, there is a definition that is given by the National Academy of Medicine in 2015, which says failure to A, establish an accurate and timely explanation of the patient's health problem, or communicate that explanation to the patient. Please look at the second part of it. It's not just about making a wrong diagnosis. It's also about how you fail to communicate. And this is where patient engagement is so important when it comes to diagnosis. A diagnostic error occurs when a patient's diagnosis is missed altogether. This is another definition. Or inappropriately delayed. Delayed, not that it is not made, but delayed. Or wrong, as judged by the eventual appreciation of definitive information. So here you have a misdiagnosis, you have a wrong diagnosis, or you have delayed diagnosis, or lack of diagnosis. So all these things constitute diagnostic errors. There is an increasingly recognized threat to public health, to the population at large, which estimates that 5% of adults being affected in the outpatient environment are subject to diagnostic errors, and 6 to 17% of those result in adverse events. Diagnostic error has also been shown to be responsible for, well, now we all practice defensive medicine, and litigation is the only word that scares us. and something that helps us a lot in accreditation process, in documentation, for implementing a lot of best practices, because that seems to be something that all hospitals need to worry about. And our patients, our community is so well informed about the opportunity to file a case that they will not hesitate to do it at the slightest issues. The WHO recently prioritized patient safety areas in primary care and included diagnostic errors as a high priority problem. So you have everybody looking at it. In addition, a recent report from the Institute of Medicine in the USA, Improving Diagnosis in Healthcare, concluded that most people will likely experience a diagnostic error in their lifetime. That means all of us sitting here, you, me, everyone, we have the chance of facing at least one diagnostic error in our lifetime. So is the problem serious? As you can see on the slide, these are the statistics which have been published as to the impact of diagnostic errors. There is this study in this Birmingham and Women's Hospital which has shown that in an analysis from the electronic health records, 29 hospitals across the country, that's the range, and 2,428 patients, they have, this was more of the patients in the ICU, they have experienced a diagnostic error. It's out of about 23%. That means 550 patients. Now that's not a small number. That's a huge number, 23%. And this could be extrapolated to all our populations in all our hospitals. Another study estimated that 5% of US adults who seek outpatient care experience a diagnostic error. Postmortem examination research that spans several decades has consistently shown that diagnostic errors contribute to about 10% of patient deaths. We are not talking about just harm or adverse events alone. We're talking about patient deaths. The Harvard Medical Practice Study, which reviewed medical records, found diagnostic errors in 17% of the adverse events that occurred in hospitalized patients. A study in Netherlands found that diagnostic errors comprise 6.4% of hospital adverse events, and an analysis of malpractice claims, the litigations that we talk about, there is a high amount of patient misdiagnosis or diagnostic errors. What's missing in this slide? Any study published in India? So we're always very keen to get data from the West. What does it say? We're still scared about reporting errors, right? We continue with that legacy. We're scared of publishing things. We don't know what is the burden of diagnostic errors in our country. So these are the things we need to go back and look into. So these are a few definitions, again, to understand what you mean by diagnosis. You have misdiagnosis, delayed. We spoke about these things, so I will go on to the next slide. And these are some of the high-risk areas diagnosed for, which have been determined for diagnostic errors. Infections. We all know infection, well, it's a big Pandora's box when we say infection. There are a lot of things. Oh, I'm already out of time. Great. Cardiovascular disease, cancer, pediatrics, all these things are the ones that are mostly at high risk. These are some models, again, which explain to us the relationship between diagnostic errors, missed opportunities, and patient harm. And the topic actually talks about challenges and strategies. One of the greatest challenge, we all know, is the underreporting. Second thing being, we don't have a yardstick. Or how do we measure? Just like yesterday, we had a good discussion on this by another panel. The same thing. What indicator do we use? Or who decides this is a diagnostic error? Because it is so much of clinical judgment. It is so much of measuring the clinician's knowledge, and clinical skills. So that's always a challenge. Also the fact that communication, I think every other session spoke about communication issues. Even the previous session, communication is a big issue. And lack of communication, these are some of the challenges we see when it comes to why diagnostic errors happen. Limited access to specialized expertise. So every hospital may not be an Apollo or an Aster or a Fortis. We are talking about a big country like India where accessible healthcare, affordable healthcare, and all this raises big questions when it comes to, let's say, public health, the primary healthcare systems that we have. We may not have very high-level equipments, diagnostic or otherwise, to make sure that we reach the right diagnosis. Insufficient training and education,
patient-related factors. They may not have revealed the entire history. They may not have given all the details. All these comes over-reliance on technology, failure to follow up. These are all some of the challenges. Coming to the strategies, well, every challenge we have an opportunity for improvement. So based on that, one very important thing is first identifying or understanding that diagnostic errors do happen, acknowledging that getting to know these diagnostic errors will only help us to make those improvements. The rest all things are things we already know. Utilize good technology, increased communication. It's all about not the theory, it's about how do you implement it. So I think realizing the fact that there is a gap here, making sure we are all working towards that same goal. Again, getting out statistics or getting people to report. Sometimes I think self-reporting helps more in this particular case, is something that might help us all to come together and acknowledge that there is a common problem and how we need to sort this out. A lot of our quality assurance program, a lot of our patient feedback, empowering the patients to come back and talk to us, patient engagement, definitely all these things also help in ensuring diagnostic errors are captured and we can prevent those in the future. So these are some of the common goals, and as we always say, we need to go back and look at what we can do, how we can do it. Peer reviews, medical audits, these are all very important things. Whenever there has been, I'm sure we all have faced litigations, hospitals do face litigation. Instead of just trying to solve that case, there has to be an academic team looking into the peer review, looking at what went wrong. Can we prevent this from happening again? So those are some of the steps we need to learn from our mistakes, and the learning that we have today are from the mistakes of so many generations in the past. So we need to acknowledge that and accept that. So those are some of the reference, and thank you all. Can take questions if any.
Thank you, Dr. Anna. I don't think we'll have time for questions now, but since we have only 3 speakers, maybe we can take questions at the end. So I just want to say that all of you who saw that presentation would probably have realized that no matter what we do in quality, it requires a special band of courage to go and have a discussion with the clinician about a wrong diagnosis. So for those of you who've done it, thumbs up. Those who have not done it, I'm sure it's happening in your hospital, so please go back and do it. I think you will find that there's a big improvement going forward, right? So the second speaker is Dr. Pramod Kumar Adusumilli, who's the Associate Professor in MS Ramaya University of Applied Sciences, and he's going to talk to us about medical device safety surveillance systems in India, the Material Vigilance Program of India. Right. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you. So very good afternoon to all the dignitaries. So as rightly said by the previous speaker, the stage was set in well context, so which made us very easy to carry out further. So before I start with my presentation, I would like to ask how many of you have seen any adverse event with the medical devices among here? So hardly few hands I can see. So my presentation for the next few minutes will be on the medical device safety surveillance systems in India, current practices by the Material Vigilance Program of India, and the future directions. So this is my disclaimer. So need for the material vigilance. So many a times people ask, like healthcare professionals, what is the need for monitoring the safety of these medical devices? So these are the glimpses of few reports which are available in the public domain. So you can see during the COVID situation also we have seen many infrared thermometers and oximeters. There is so many misreadings that has happened, which made so much chaos in the diagnosis part. And also this one good example you can see. So one attender who is working at that hospital carrying an oxygen cylinder, he was sucked into that MRI machine, and finally the person died because of that incident. So all this can happen once we don't know how to handle the medical devices properly. Today is because we are meeting it for the patient safety. So you can see this report, fire in incubator, 5 infants shot to death in Punjab. This has happened in the year 2009. But the same incident is happening in our country after a decade also. Like in 2019 also you can see reports from Amravati and few other states. So what are we learning from these things? Even though it is getting published, all are getting aware. With so much technology in place, what is the foolproof risk management strategies that we are adopting in our hospitals? So many such incidents you can find out from the social media. So for that purpose, Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission, which works for the Government of Health and Family Welfare, has established two programs, that is called Pharmacovigilance Program of India and Material-Vigilance Program of India. So this Pharmacovigilance Program of India works towards safety monitoring of the pharmaceuticals, whereas the Material-Vigilance Program of India looks for the safety of the medical devices in our country. So they have four key stakeholders. One is IPC itself in identifying the centers, whereas we have second one, Sri Chitra Tirunal Institute of Medical Sciences from Trivandrum. They helps in doing the research analysis. We have NHSRC from New Delhi. They will help in developing the SOPs. And also we have the regulator CDSO. They will give the recommendations to all the manufacturers. So these are the notified bodies for the medical devices which are recognized by the Indian regulator CDSO. So all these 13 notified bodies helps the regulator in understanding the audit purposes, better manufacturing, distribution and sales of medical devices in our country. So you can see there are some medical device adverse event monitoring centers. So this program has started in the year 2015, but the guidelines has come in the year 2018. From then, the centers were recruited from the Material-Vigilance Program of India. So over the year, currently up till 2023 December, we have 387 centers, out of which 50% of the centers were in the states of Kerala, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. The probable reason is, one of the thing is, the key stakeholder, the Sri Chitra Tirunal Institute, is present in the Kerala, which is more involved in sensitizing all the hospitals around the districts and state. And also if you see the medical colleges that are present in India, 25% are coming from these three states. That might be the possible reason for more enrollment of the hospitals from these three states. If you see the trends of reporting these adverse events, so with the increase in the number of medical device monitoring centers, the reporting has also been increased. So last year, if you can see, around 10,000 adverse events has been reported to the Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission. Initially, when the program was started, the more reporting is coming from the manufacturers. Once the medical device centers has been enrolled, the more number of reports are coming from the hospitals, especially from the tertiary care teaching hospitals. And if you also see the trend of device reporting, more number of reports has been reported with the cardiac stents, followed by the disposable syringes and ventilators. So we can see how the reports were serious and non-serious categorization. Many of the reports were also serious reports. So in order to have this surveillance system, Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission has come up with these two forms. These are called ADR reporting forms. So one form is for the consumers, which will be having very limited information to be captured, and another so throughout any point of the time they can call. If it is not working day, even in the holiday, the number will be captured. On the next working day, the team will call to the concerned persons. In order to bring the awareness to the consumers, so some posters has been developed and printed. It was circulated to all the PHCs and nearby clinics. Not only limited to that, so whenever possible, like such good conferences are happening, the team has taken so many webinars, seminars and conferences in training the healthcare professionals as well, and also to the manufacturers and even to the regulators. So knowledge dissemination by the MEPI is from 3 different modes, which is very important to understand, because many of you are healthcare professionals. You can visit to the IPC website. There you can see the safety alerts will be circulated. So wherein you can understand in our country, with the use of some particular device, what are the adverse events that can happen. So those are the safety alerts. And also IPC directly recommends some suggestions to the regulator CDSO. Once CDSO accept that, based on the panel discussion of the experts, they will give the information to the manufacturers to change the labels of that particular medical device. And also the IPC do some publications which will be helpful for all the healthcare professionals. So initiatives taken by the Materials Program of India are these 3 main. One is that they have made MOU with the NABH, requesting or mandating all the clinical institutions to report the incident on regular basis. So this is a part of NABH now. And also the Health Secretary of the Government of India has issued an order for implementing MVPA program in government clinical institutions. And also the Directorate General of Health Sciences issued an order for implementing this program through national programs like National Program on Family Control. So many of the teaching hospitals now coming up with the device registries, which is a multifaceted thing, wherein different disease characterization and the adverse events has been completely captured by doing the follow-up. This one will fall under the active surveillance. Previous all things we can categorize under the passive surveillance. And also MEPI is providing some internships for the students who are into the healthcare profession. So wherein they can conduct some clinical studies. The reports will be evaluated by the physicians or the coordinators who are heading that hospital, and finally it will be submitted to the IPC. So the emerging technologies that has to be adopted or which is planned by the IPC is to integrate the web-based reporting tool. If you see the current method, it is only through the ADR reporting forms, but they wanted to develop the web tool. And also they wanted to come up with speech to text, which will be majorly used for the rural persons. If the consumer directly wants to report some incident, once they speak, based on the NLP, it get captured. And also they are working on the image to text based on the optical characterization recognition from picture to text. Once they scan that any label what they have used the medical device, then it can be directly sent to the IPC for capturing the information. And also current youth, majority of the time they are spending in the social media, and it is also existing in the Western world to collect the safety information from the various social media that we have. Because many a times if you see, they put hashtag in the LinkedIn and they say that by the use of this medical device, so many incidents are happening in the hospital. So through that also we can take the information, and various learning tools by using the predictive tools from the advanced technology, and by using the chatbots and assistive tools in the hospitals. And the current emerging technology which is not in place in our country is about the blockchain and real-time data capture. So IPC currently is working with some team of experts from the IT profession to bring this in place for the Indian population. So what will be the benefit of adopting these technologies to PMS? All of you are aware, just to highlight again. So early detection of the safety concerns can happen. So once that early detection is happened, we can safeguard our population. Improved risk of the assessment by conducting various causality assessments also. Personalized safety monitoring, and also by enhanced transparency. All this can be the beneficial of adopting these technologies. And what are the challenges and future directions? As said, many of the healthcare professionals are not aware about these systems that are in place in our country, first of all. So data privacy and security is also there. They think that once I report some information, whether there will be any security reasons and all. Integration and interoperability discussions. Regulatory frameworks has to be still adopted in all the country, state regulators. Lack of knowledge and awareness about all the healthcare professionals. Even though you are seeing the reports, you don't know where to report it. And also about the uncertainty regarding the causality relationship between the drug or medical device and the adverse events that are happening. Once you suspect, you have all the rights to submit the report, even if it is not a confirmed. And what will be the benefits of our program? The main thing is generation of the medical device safety data based on the Indian population. Previous speaker has rightly said that not much information is available from our population. So that can be overcome by adopting to these programs. Educational initiatives to healthcare professionals for improving the safe use of the medical devices. Benefit risk ratio and safety and effective use of the medical devices can happen because of this material vigilance program of India. With that, I thank.
Thank you, Dr. Pramod, for a very comprehensive coverage of an important but not often discussed topic. So thank you. And now I request Shoma Das, who heads quality at Eastern Region, to present her case study on integrating quality with patient safety.
Thank you, Dr. Rohini ma'am, and all other co-speakers for that beautiful session and a generous introduction. So coming to the last but not the least session, and I'm sure you all would have made a conclusion, as Dr. Rohini also said that, so it's not two different words, quality and patient safety. They are in fact one. They're married to each other kind of thing. And that's what I would like to just stress upon by giving a small case study, an example which I'm sure most of us sitting over here have witnessed some of the other time or have even heard about it. So I've tried to make it quite simpler because it's not something new which we are discussing. It's like every now and then this particular topic we come across. So however, Keeping the time in consideration, let me start the presentation. Next. So that's my topic, integration of quality with the patient safety at Apollo Hospital. So a small case study where we are familiar with the gentleman here, a 67-year-old James Bond. Let's imagine he comes with a diagnosis of a chest pain, and then he's admitted to a room number 420. And what happens next is a nightmare, where at 2 a.m. when he suddenly tries to get up and tries to go to the washroom, he has a fall and unfortunately breaks his neck. So a common study, a common case, which many a times we have heard, and I'm sure a few of my colleagues from quality and nursing and medical team, of course, have participated in doing a root cause analysis or understanding what happened to our James Bond. So this is what actually falls. It's once again how it says, oops, gravity strikes again. Though falls are very, very serious, however unavoidable, and we come across a lot many such situations. These falls have been decreasing over the last few decades, and it's a very good news. However, it still remains to be a significant problem in small, big, middle, and any kind of hospital, and for reasons well known. Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, which is AHRQ, has also given some facts like 7 lakhs to 10 lakhs hospitalized patients fall every year, which results around close to 2,50,000 injuries and 11,000 deaths, which is horrible figure actually to quote with. Approximately 2% of the hospitalized patients fall at least once during their stay. Again, a very scary statement, and these are some of the facts which are available with us. Approximately 1 in 4 falls results in injury, and around 10 resulting in serious injuries, which none of us intend to do. But patient falls are still, it remains one of the most adverse event reported in the hospitals. And some more statistics from CDC, it says that fall death rates in the US have increased 30%, a whooping number, 30% from 2007 to 2016. And if this continues, unfortunately, 7 falls death every year, we will reach to this figure by 2030, a real worrying statement. Now let's look into some of the reasons, commonest reason which we come across, and various studies have shown, or various analyses have shown, like wet floors. I'm sure you are aware of these, that wet floors, no support or grab bar when the patients try to move, the culprit drugs like Lasix and all, restless patients who are not able to, who are supposed to not to move, lack of supervision when the patients are left all by their own, uneven flooring, loose or bulging carpeting, lack of room orientation, as in where they can reach out for help, where is the call bell, where is the amenities kept, lack of proper lighting, where in absence of a light or proper lighting if they try to get up and then the fall happens, and most importantly, lack of patient and family education, as they're not aware they should not be doing a certain thing. So these are the certain problems. So is there a solution? Is it avoidable? Can we come across, can we have certain processes, have certain quality systems in place which will ensure that the patients are safe and they don't lead to a fall? Yes, of course it is possible. We follow a very simple yet quite efficient method which is called PITS. It's one of the formula which we can say, and the entire thing revolves around the patient care, as a patient is the most important thing, and these all quality systems, having them in place will definitely ensure that our patients are safe and it doesn't lead to a fall. So it all starts with the proper planning, having proper policies, strategies, SOPs, and manuals in place, as our co-speakers also stressed on having NABS, JCI, and various other accreditations which ensures that the standards are followed, and of course having a lot of mechanism like internal audits, a lot of supervision by various team members. So it all depends on how a good planning of the entire system will eventually lead to a better patient safe environment, and thereby improving the overall quality, which comes as I in the PITS model, which focuses on standardization, having pathways in place, having various calls or various connects among the team, where it's a collaborative team approach who together work. It's not that one team only contributes. Everyone decides, sits, and they plan to improve on the entire existing pattern so that the patients don't fall in this particular example. And again, focusing on measurement, analysis, and validation. As my co-speaker also stressed that though we have a lot of theory papers available with us, but unless and until people don't report, people don't inform, nothing can be measured, and hence nothing can be improvised. So there are various processes in place. I'm sure a lot of other all the hospitals have some other mechanism, like the quality indicators, data validation, various checklists, various platforms to report an incident. And based on that, it all depends on how we translate that into a training, where the competency mapping of the staff is done. Based on that, further training, further development, various workshops, webinars are planned so that the staff get trained, and hence these kind of errors don't repeat. And finally, the most important thing is sustaining the improvement. So sustenance is again done through various audits, having various award systems, and most importantly, recognizing the good work, acknowledging the good work, and thereby continuing the same process again and again. So hence a small model again where we emphasize that incident reporting is the main key, and it has been stressed upon again and again that unless and until we start reporting, we don't encourage our staff, we don't make it non-punitive, a blame-free culture, we would never come to know what are the actual reasons behind anything. In this case, it's a fall, but it could be a medication error, it could be a device-related error, or anything. The main mantra is encourage your staff to report, let it be anything, including your near misses. And hence we can have various platforms. It can be a digital, it can be just kind of message or a checklist where the staff is actually encouraged to report. Not only that, they are even acknowledged, and they are even thanked in various platforms for ensuring that a particular incident which has jeopardized the safety of not only a patient but a family member or an employer, even the hospital. So that needs to be there. A blame-free culture needs to be implemented, and overall the leadership involvement, where the leadership actually encourages an open door policy and thereby promoting more and more reporting of such incidents, and see that there is a seamless communication which flows between various departments, and hence ensuring that patient safety is given the utmost importance. We can, with the help of again quality systems, we can use various methodologies once we have this data through the incident reporting or other mechanism to analyze through forms of flow chart, cause and effect diagram, control charts, various checklists, histogram, Pareto, scatter plot, and there are many more which has come. So it's just the way once you have a data in hand, you have the main power in your hand to translate that into important information, and that's where quality comes into picture, and thereby ensuring that patient safety is in place. And hence, with all the data available, we could analyze for this particular example of fall, how can that be avoided, or that can be at least prevented. So we have categorized various patients into different categories like vulnerable and non-vulnerable. So thereby, we know that vulnerable patients need extra care, extra effort, because they cannot do the things on their own. Similarly, a better room orientation came out of the study, which means that we need to explain in various mechanism, which could be a visual, which could be a brochure, or which could be even verbal, about the room amenities. What are the do's and don'ts a patient should do to avoid a fall, a proper fall risk assessment, always using a seat belt when they're mobilized. They should not be left alone. So this list goes, this is just an example. This is a huge list which we can actually derive, and that everything depends on how well we are encouraging our staff, our team members to report and to come up with various solutions through brainstorming. So these RCAs actually help us to get into the depth of the problem, and thereby coming up with solution, not leading to blame somebody or punish somebody. So overall, it's all about putting the patient first, thereby marrying these two entities, quality culture with the patient safety, where there are not two balls, however, there is just one ball, and thereby developing a shared vision and value, aligning various processes and system, and helps us to understand the root cause for every problem without even punishing the staff or the people who are assigned with this. And at the end, engaging the patients and family, which is the most important, because the safety doesn't stop at the hospital. It should be continued till the patient is there with the family and goes back home. And hence, the happy patient can go back, and they are part of this culture, they're part of the safety culture, and our James Bond is back into action again. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Shoma, and I must congratulate you on breaking James Bond's nose. I can't remember ever that this has been done in history, so you have that advantage. I think we can take a few minutes for questions, if there are any, to any of the three panelists. Yeah, please. I think you'll have to come up here. Or you have
This question is for Sir, Dr. Pramod, sir. Can you give us more insights on what kind of incidents to be reported to the like Meteo Vigilance Program of India? Like, rather you give us some examples, because it is a relatively new topic.
Yeah, it is not specific to any particular department. Throughout the hospital, there will be categorization of the medical devices. So it starts with simple surgical gloves. Many of the physicians reported allergic reactions with the latex gloves. So that also can be an incident. PPE kits, that can also be an incident. There is a particular other form for the PPE kits also. So it is not limited to one thing, like surgical sutures, breakdown of the needles, everything can be reported as an incident to the medical device. But categorization will be A, B, C, D. A and B will be like mild to moderate medical devices. C and D means very invasive. Those are having high risk. So all the invasive will fall under C and D, high risk class.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, for you only, the question is, as you described already the Meteo Vigilance, so, okay, the hospitals are reporting to the Meteo Vigilance, and the device you are giving the recommendation to the company. But is for the drugs how we have, and the drugs is causing the adverse drug reaction or anything like, then it's coming in the banned drug list.
Correct.
So for the Meteo Vigilance also, whatever the medical devices is reported, is there any banned devices list, or it's publishing anywhere like?
Yeah, so many medical devices were also recalled because it is not the ultimate option to ban any drug or the medical device. It takes a lot of research, so much billions for a company to release any pharmaceutical drug or the medical device. So the last option or the resort will be the banning of the things. Otherwise, if it is a particular problem with particular batch, then it will be recalled. Or if any strategies can be developed, that will be taken care by the manufacturer. Yeah, list is available. List is available. So if I remember, during COVID, we have taken some masks from the China. So those were found to be having some fungus. So we have completely banned using that mask. So that entire list you can find out from the IPC website or CDSCO website.
Thanks for your nice session on MEPA, sir. As madam has explained about the fall risk and needle stick injury, similarly we have a lot of things, PNDT, so on. Similarly, we can have some policies so that this can be in a high sensitivity, so that the patient safety of medical equipments will also be taken care.
Yeah, so as it is evolving, in 2015 only we have started, it is very in infancy stage. So many experts are coming with so many strategies and all. So one by one the IPC is adopting, and it is not limited that only IPC has to do. So many well corporate hospitals are also in place who are coming with so many quality standards. So they can also adopt that and they can put their own action of plans.
If there are no more questions, and I would just like to thank the three speakers for this session. Very interesting ideas presented very well, and you can see very well received by the audience. Thank you.
we request everyone to move to the main hall for the final sessions, please.